missing. Okay, welcome everyone to our special meeting of council to discuss our budget. We will call our meeting to order and recognize that we're holding our meeting on the traditional territories of the Shuswap and Huipachesset First Nations. Councillor Washington is going to be late joining us today. Would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a second? Second. Any questions or changes to the agenda? All in favor? Carried. Okay, and before we get started, we want to recognize that we have our new fire chief in the room. I think we're going to do an official welcome at our next council meeting, but welcome to our new fire chief, Chief Owens. We're looking forward to having you here, and we hear it's your first day and you're starting with a budget meeting, so what a great way to start. Okay, so we have minutes from the special meeting of council held January 28th, 2019 at 6 p.m. Would somebody like to move adoption?
Move to adopt.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Carried. And that brings us to reports. So I think we'll get our staff just to go through a general overview of each of the reports as we go through them, especially or specifically for the public's interest as well. The first one is on development cost charges. Director of Finance, could you just give a brief overview?
Oh. Hold it down. Okay. Not techie today. Okay, it was suggested that we look at the development cost charges to fund some projects. And I'm just going to provide some background information on the DCCs and what they were for. There is a degree of flexibility. They don't have to be used in the development that they were collected on. But water development charges that were collected must be used for water projects, sewer on sewer. The Anderson Hill development bumped them up quite a bit in 2018. So in water, we have about 120,000, sewer 85, storm 38, roads 155, and parks about 25. Established in 2010, and it's been growing slowly, except for last year.
Thank you. Councillors, questions? Councillor Paulson.
Just maybe a more defined or clarified position on specifically what this fund can be actually applied to or spent on? Because we'll just spend it if you don't tell us.
It's not on operations. Each of the water fund can be spent on water capital projects. It has to be capital and it has to be the same sort or same purpose as the source was.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. When do they actually get charged? So for Anderson Hill, would that just be the portion of the subdivision that where the lots are already subdivided, and the part that we're currently in the process of rezoning would be collected when that process is completed?
They were collected in 2018, so I'm going to say whatever was done in 2018.
Okay.
And that's a planner question. Sorry, I don't know the answer
Sure.
to.
I'll come on up.
Mayor and Council, I think they're normally collected at the time of subdivision or building permit application, or sometimes at the issuance of a development permit. Okay. And they're only collected for the number of units that are being subdivided or whatever. Okay.
Great.
So in the case of Anderson Hill,
yeah,
it'll be phased over time as
Wonderful.
they develop their project.
So we've got a lot more to collect there still. Thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions on that report, would somebody like to move receipt? Second? All in favor? Carried. And we'll call up our officer in charge to give a brief overview of his report.
Thank you, Worship. Last council meeting, I provided a high-level overview of police service in the community, and there was a question, Your Worship, if there were opportunities. I asked for 2 additional officers, but in lieu of one of those those officers, is there an opportunity to civilianize, is the terminology, one of our regular member positions? And the community policing liaison member would be the most suited position for that at the detachment. A lot of the duties there are in relation to volunteer management, managing the programs, be it community policing, citizens patrol, speed watch, and organizing the training and functions and all of the accountabilities related to those programs. So if we were to exchange the police officer position for a municipal employee, then we could redeploy that police officer into the field, ideally crime reduction, boots on the road, doing that proactive work, holding our chronic offenders accountable. There are some duties that the community liaison officer does that require a police officer, but those duties we'd redistribute them amongst other members at the detachment. More than likely the sergeant position, the ops support NCO is the position title.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Paulson.
Just looking at the position as it sits today, and if we remove that officer, are there specifically policing issues that a civilian person wouldn't be able to do, or with regards to this position? I mean, you've listed volunteer management, training and functions and stuff like that, but is there an actual enforcement of law that the new person would?
So they would be able to, I envision the right person in there could also help with a analysis of our crime stats, the admin portion of that, prepare reports for the members at the detachment. And I've seen that before where, and the community volunteers are good for that as well. They gather their eyes and ears information they see in the community, and certainly the coordinator would be able to hop on the computer and see where our hot spots are and those types of things. There's lots of things, lots of opportunity for a municipal employee to engage in that position well beyond the volunteer management. But I do have to stress that volunteer management is a significant job in of itself.
Councillor Corbeil.
Yes, Inspector Hunter. You used the number $170,000 per officer, which seems very high. And when I was researching this, North Cowichan was asking for more police officers. You're not alone in that, as a matter of fact. Many communities are asking for more police officers. They use the number 130,000. Do you have any idea why there's a discrepancy there?
I'm not sure why they would use that unless, I don't know, because 174 is the number across the province for municipalities over 15,000. And I need to stress here, a constable makes $86,000 a year, so they're not making 174, or I'd be a constable myself.
CAO.
Madam Mayor, as would I if I could pass the exam. It might be that the communities that Councillor Corbeil is referring to don't pay 90% of the policing costs, and the city of Port Alberni pays 90% of policing costs. Likely that's the reason.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. May I ask you a question, Inspector Hunter?
Of course.
Is this something that you would recommend, making this position a civilian instead of an RCMP position? Do you see it working well? And
I do see it working well, Your Worship. This would not be the only community that does this. Nanaimo does it. Williams Lake does it. Down Island, there's a couple of detachments that do it. They report. They would report directly to the office manager, in our case, Galen Thorogood, with a dotted line reporting to the operations support NCO. And it's strictly the administrative role and managing our volunteers. In a perfect world, I could stop my sentence right there. If money was not an object, crime rate wasn't high, it's always nice to have a police officer in these positions because they can do that little bit extra. But I see a lot more value in taking that police officer position and literally putting them on the road with the other members, holding our chronic offenders accountable. We're just at that phase in our community. All hands on deck. We need to grab a hold of this and do everything we can. Similarly, currently our school liaison officer has been redeployed to the streets. We don't have a designated traffic position at the moment. They're deployed, general duty, crime reduction, getting into the streets and doing what we can with these chronic offenders.
Okay. Any other questions from councillors? Okay. I read an interesting article in the Times Colonist where they were talking about with their policing that roughly they said up to 80% of their calls are mental, social calls, basically mental health. Do we have any, so I mean, the intent of that article was to say we need to invest more in social services, and I know you've made those comments as well. Look at the whole picture. Do we have any sense of what our kind of split is between what is actually criminal calls in our community, and I know that we have a lot, versus what are what's the other side of it? I know that they overlap, but
they do overlap, and more often than not, those social chronic offenders or the folks that are addicted to drugs and mental health, they do get into that criminal realm where we discuss if we can get at that root of the problem, all of that would go away. We have one of the highest, well, it is the highest percentage of violent crime on the island, and we do spend a lot of time dealing with files that are not of a criminal nature, that have to do with the Mental Health Act and helping people through some issues that they're going through as a public safety for them. We spend hours at the hospital, often 2 members at a time. There's a lot of those.
okay. Councillor Solda.
To carry on from what our mayor was asking you, this has been an ongoing thing forever. I've heard this from other officers in charge, that you have to be a social worker now to be an RCMP member, and that's where most of your work goes to. As soon as you go to the hospital, what do you do with the person that's in the hospital? Where do you take them? Because there's no facilities around. I believe it's Courtney is probably the closest. Somewhere on the island there is.
Yeah, Nanaimo has a great unit there as well. It just comes down to resourcing, because once they're in our custody under the Mental Health Act, we are responsible for them until a psychiatrist or 2 doctors see them and commit them to the hospital. And then, of course, that's going to be triaged, right? It can be a busy emergency room up there, right, and there's life or limb events that come through, and we just wait until a doctor's available. And it can be time consuming at times. It's just we have a lot going on in our community.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Would somebody like to move receipt of the report?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. And our next report is from the Manager of Bylaw Services. Welcome. And I have to say I quite like your shirt today. Although
Thank you,
it's
Madam
pretty
Mayor.
cold out there, so I like the spirit.
Trying to stay warm out there. Madam Mayor and Council, I was asked to provide some comments on 2 questions at a previous budget meeting. One in regards to vacant building registration permits and the fees surrounding that. And the second is general ticket revenue from bylaw services and why the number is the way it is being proposed for this budget. So in terms of vacant building registration permit fees, I did a little research because this was something that was implemented before my time here. I don't have much information to provide. It looks like historically there's been 2 applications submitted. One was issued a refund and one met the conditions. So I know that the former Director of Development Services, Scott Smith, was responsible for handling those fees. And to date, we just received a new application, which kind of sparked this process of realizing, what's the formal process, who's handling that. So that's something my department will be following up on. And I personally would like some clarification and do a little more research on how we can utilize that provision in our bylaw, because I think it's a very effective tool under our building standards bylaw to use and start implementing as we progress. The second point was in terms of ticket revenue. The amount proposed is on the conservative side, and the rationale behind that is there's many variables affecting our ticket revenue. It could be processes on our side in terms of collection of fees. It can be the amount of tickets we're actually issuing versus the amount we're actually collecting. That I mentioned at a previous council meeting, we had a very low collection rate, and it was about 14% last I looked. Following that, in our new processes identified, we've been able to bring it up to about 40%, which is getting consistent with the rest of the province. But there's just so many variables in place. Until I have a full year here with this brand new department being formed, it's really hard to determine, what that amount's going to be, and then we can adjust in subsequent years. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Corbeil.
Just a question, Mr. Scott, on empty buildings. Is there not a provision where they have to be either made available for sale or lease if they're sitting vacant?
There's no requirement that they have to be for sale. They do have to be maintained, though. So the point of that permit process is that regular inspections are being conducted by city staff to ensure that they're still remaining safe. They don't necessarily have to occupy or sell them, but they do have to make sure that they're up to the standards of our city bylaws.
Looking at the fire department, they're listening to what you just said intently.
We will be coordinating and meeting in the near future.
Any other questions from council? Okay, would somebody like to move receipts?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Second? All in favor? Great, thank you. And our next, well, not reports, but CAO, do you want to give an overview of McLean Mill Dam?
Sure, Madam Mayor. At the previous meeting of council, previous budget meeting of council, council asked the question, do we have to undertake dam repairs in 2019? So I don't have a yes or no response to that. I haven't been able to determine anywhere where we've been ordered by a regulator to undertake dam repairs. The dam, as I understand it, and our project managing engineer is away on vacation, so I couldn't access all the information I would like to bring. But as I understand it, the dam has a concrete core. It is safe in terms of holding back the water. The issues that we want to repair are pass-through pipes that are going through the dam that are failing, and some, for lack of a better term, wooden bridges internal to the dam that enable truck traffic to go back and forth. And those log truck bridges are starting to decay. The logs are decaying, which will limit the load capacity of the dam. So if we don't undertake those repairs this year, we will have to undertake them at some point in the future. They were envisioned to be done in 2014 when the stream diversion project was undertaken, but for reasons that I'm not aware, we didn't undertake that work at the same time. We are currently preparing tender documents and necessary preparations to undertake the work in 2019, and if we're not going to, council can direct us not to do that. I would ask and recommend that council do proceed with this project. It might help to know that I met on Saturday with the Alberni Valley Enhancement Association, the folks who run the hatchery on site, and they asked me to express to you that they rely on the ability to drive back and forth over that bridge, often with heavy trucks that carry loads of water and fish. So they are reliant on heavy truck traffic passing over that dam for their operation, and I know that the Industrial Heritage Society members are reliant as well for moving truck traffic across that dam. So I don't have a yes or no for you. Everything that I've found so far indicates that we should and is recommended, but I've attached on the agenda a letter from the provincial dam inspector telling us that we need to do a better job of managing our dam, which we do, and regardless of whether we do the remediation work or not, we will be developing a safety plan and a different approach to how we manage it. I've also attached a letter from Northwest Hydraulic Consultants, one of the engineers working for us on this, and it outlines the work plan, essentially.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question. So if we don't do the repairs, what happens? I mean, could we live without it? Do you want to give me a little scenario?
And everything I tell you is subject to being corrected by our project managing engineer on his return. Yeah, my understanding is if we do not undertake the repairs today in 2019, that The dam will be safe in terms of holding back water, but it will continue to not be safe for full loads on it. So we've already applied somewhat of a load restriction on it, and we'll have to reconsider that and continue to consider as those logs internal to the bridge decay. We'll have to continue to limit the load capacity of the drive across. So that's the issue.
So I have another question. So the trucks that go over that bridge, is there a way to have another little road going around it instead of building a bridge? I mean, bridges are expensive, we know that, so there should be another access.
There isn't another access on our property. There is a long route access around through Island Timberlands lands, and recently Industrial Heritage Society had a permit to travel through there, but I understand it's a long road around, and they've had some trouble with IT maintaining the ability or the permission to travel that way.
So maybe it's some dialogue we need to work with IT about to be good corporate citizens.
Madam Mayor, if I may,
Yeah.
council allocated $200,000 at the end of 2018 to undertake the dam repairs and associated testing and any remediation that was unknown at the time. So you'll see in the draft budget, we have a total of $263,000, which includes $200 that was allocated last year, plus $63,000 more to undertake the testing that we are currently doing and all the dam repairs that we envision doing. So the money, the bulk of the money is already allocated from 2018. Doesn't mean you can't reallocate it. It's still city money. But this is not, it would be if we were to go ahead with this, it would be a burden of $63,000. And my recollection is that I think 30 of that is from general revenue and 33 was from land sale, I think. It's on the projects list.
I like the report that was given in our package, but a lot of it is, of course, French to me, basically, because it's an engineer's report, right? It's not, just anybody's report. So any public reading this would never really understand everything because everything's so technical. And that's, again, I rely on the experts for that, and that's what we have. So thank you.
Councillor Poon.
You mentioned the load limit. At what point does the limit become unusable?
That's a really hard question to answer. So we're dealing with logs that are underground, basically. They're inside a gravel dam, and they're decaying, and there's really no way, they could be cored. We could have an engineer drill them and calculate what's the strength that's left in them. Right now, the load limit is somewhat experiential. For example, if a truck drove over it yesterday, that's the load limit. It can carry that again today, we think. I'm not trying to be flippant. That's basically how we're establishing load limit. But as I said, the hatchery folks tell us that they need to move trucks with large tanks of water and fish over top of that. And I'm not sure at this point in time if that's going to be within the scope of what we should be allowing on that.
So what is the consequence of closing that to traffic?
The two negative consequences that I could see now would be three. Let me give you three. One is the industrial heritage folks would likely come see you and ask you to invest in the dam so that they can move their heavy equipment back and forth. Two would be the hatchery folks would ask you to invest in the dam so they could move their trucks across with water and fish. And the third one I think would have to be fire protection. There's a number of structures beyond the dam that are on city property and are heritage structures. And if that dam is load restricted, then any firefighting activities would have to happen. The apparatus wouldn't be able to move across the dam, so you'd have to basically forward or advance hoses out in that direction. I'm not a fire chief. I think it can happen, but it is a limitation on operations.
Councillor Corbeil.
Should we not wait until the contaminated site survey is accomplished before we start making any further investments out there?
That's a good point. I think the two are largely not related. I think we're going to continue to own McLean Mill. The city's going to continue to own it in perpetuity. I can't envision a time or a world where we're not going to own it, and I can't envision a circumstance where we wouldn't maintain it as a National Historic Site. But those are completely your decisions, and you may choose to exercise one or the other of those So from where I sit, we need to maintain our assets, even though we don't know the cost of the environmental. Regardless of the environmental, if there are no costs there or significant costs there, we still have a National Historic Site to maintain, and the dam is one of those assets that will need to be maintained. Long-term, the alternative is decommission the dam. If we don't want to repair it, we'll have to decommission it, I would think, or make it absolutely nothing but pedestrian crossing until that's not safe. So eventually, I just can't see how we wouldn't be repairing this dam. And so the question, I guess, is do we do that now, or do we put that off to another year? I think that's the issue.
Councillor Paulson.
Just a couple of things. Just so we're aware that when you're dealing with dams and those sorts of things, you're dealing with a totally different provincial authority, right? And that's what I gleaned out of this letter is their regulation and stuff is kind of totally separate from the rest of the site or anything else that we look at there. Maybe there's some confusion. There's two bridges there, right? There's one further down that goes across the diverted creek. The bridge that we're talking about, bridges are really expensive, but it's pretty tiny, isn't it? It's, what, maybe 10 yards wide?
When I use the term bridge, it's internal to the dam.
Yeah.
So as you're passing over the dam, you don't even know that at some point you're passing over a hollow inside the dam that is bridged over with logs and covered with gravel. So it's internal to the dam. And again, the dam is safe. It has a concrete core in there, and that concrete core has been hidden inside gravel and logs so that it looks historic. But nothing in the dam inspector's letter that I see says the dam is not safe. The dam inspector is not at all happy with the way we've been operating our dam and is quite pointed in saying that the city has an obligation to manage the dam and to protect the safety of people downstream. Totally get that, and we're going to develop a new dam safety plan and exercise new procedures out there regardless. He's telling us we have to do that, but he's not saying we have to repair the internal bridge in the dam. The dam inspector doesn't care if we drive trucks over it or not. He just cares that it holds back water and that we manage it right.
You know, there was a bridge there until we had our site
Sure.
tours
Yeah.
last fall. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from council? Okay, my thoughts are that I can understand that we're probably going to end up doing dam work at some point. Going to end up, if not this year, doing this project in the future. It's not a project that will go away. But we have $200,000, potentially $263,000, and we have contamination work likely to be done. I see the remediation work to be our highest priority, and I think because the dam project is right in front of us, we're potentially putting that ahead of the contamination work. I think that we need to hold this money back and inconvenience people by saying, take the long road around, and so that we can save our money to do remediation work if needed. And if not needed, then let's do the dam work. But to me, the highest priority is the potential contamination work. And I think if there's, a way to keep this dam safe or the bridge safe until we figure out where we're at with remediation, I don't see that we should be putting the dam work ahead of the remediation. So that's just my thought. Councillor Solda.
And I guess I would echo the same thing as our mayor is echoing. I believe that there's going to be more issues regarding the contamination that we have, and I just want to be safe than sorry, and we'll get that contamination ahead. Yes.
Councillor Poon.
I also agree.
Everybody agrees. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. CAO, can you just remind me, is the 200,000 and the 63,000 currently in our budget, or is the 63,000 I know the 200,000 is from last year. Is the 63,000 on our options list or in our capital budget?
Madam Mayor, I'm just going to refer to the options list. And if you keep looking at me, I won't be able to find it.
I think it's on the options list. I just can't remember 100%.
I'm just trying to see where. So we have 65,000 on the options list that council's moved from capital on McLean Mill. Kathy, are you aware? It's on the options list. Are you aware where it is? There's 60. Heritage on the last page.
The
The 65 is capital.
Yeah,
That
that's-
was moved. That wouldn't be the 63 that was earmarked for the contamination testing. And
Might
it
be
would-
under, might
I
be
think
under
it was
work.
actually 80,000. I think you maybe made up the 63,000 today.
I wouldn't do that.
I think it was 80,000, and I'm just wondering if it's in capital. That's from the capital. That's a
Capital,
different
yeah.
project.
Okay.
Okay, not important. We can,
Madam Mayor, we'll find it during the meeting.
Okay.
There was 200 from last year. I'm reasonably certain there was 30 and 33, one from general revenue, one from land sale.
okay,
We'll find it and point it out to you.
okay, sounds good. I just want to make sure that we are going to have a conversation about that when we get to the projects. Would somebody like to move receipt of those two letters?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Any further comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay, next up on our agenda is the projects option list. So, council, my thought on how we'll go through this is we've had the overview from our managers on each of these projects. I would like to see us go through each of these now, and if we have follow-up questions, we can ask them. And if not, if there's a desire to have it included in our budget, then somebody can make a motion to do that for each one of the projects. And I think it's important to stress that even if we do include them in our budget, we may still take them out. So it doesn't become final until we pass our budget. So if we go through and add in all the projects that we think are important, and then we look at the tax increase and think it's too big and we have to go back through and pull some out, we can do that. Nothing's final until we pass our budget, but we would be deciding which ones we intend to put in today. Director of Finance?
I have an answer on the dam.
Oh, wonderful.
It's in the 2019 capital projects because of the way we're funding it. We have 233,000 for dam repairs, 200 of which is coming from the capital reserve, which would be the 200,000 we put aside in 2018, and 33,000 from land sale reserve. And we have a further 30,000 set aside in the 2019 capital projects for water quality.
CAO, I can't believe you were right on that. I think that's changed. My memory is usually pretty accurate on numbers.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Losing gracefully is an art.
We'll see, we'll see.
This ain't over.
That's right. Okay. So, getting started with our projects, we'll just walk through them one by one. The first one is Bylaw Security Enhancement Program, $25,000, and that is intended to be a recurring cost. So this would be investing in our security matching program for a second round of funding. Is there a desire to add this to our budgets? Councillor Paulson.
I would add this to our budget, and in particular because we've launched the program.
So just to be clear, the program is from the funding we put in our budget last year.
Yep.
This is if we want to do another year. But I would agree with you. I think it's worth adding to our budget. I've heard a lot of conversation about this program over the last week or so, and a lot of desire from residential property owners to take advantage of it, which our manager indicated we would probably be trying to get to toward in some part of the second round. Okay.
I'm good with that.
Do you think we need a motion, or do you think consensus? We'll vote if we need to. Okay. Okay, Councillor Corbeil.
Madam Mayor, with, literally there's, I don't know, over $1 million or more of options, I think somehow we have to identify issues that are definitely, health and safety issues that have to be done, or, somebody could get injured, and then if there's monies left over after that, then maybe start looking at those. So the first one we touched on, does have a safety connotation to it, so I would think, yeah, makes sense. And, there's needs and there's nice, and I think we got to kind of concentrate on the needs right now.
Thank you, and I would agree with you on that, and I think especially because we do not have our strategic project or strategic plan done, I go through the list of our options here and think a lot of these projects are projects that I personally would love to do. but are not necessarily, they don't necessarily align with what our vision and our priorities are going to be yet. So it's a bit of an awkward year. And I think we need to look at what our absolute highest priority needs as a community are and be really vigilant going through these options this year. Okay, so having said that, does there appear to be a consensus, or would anyone like to speak against the security?
Just, I'm sorry, go ahead, Helen.
Well, I have nothing against it, but I think maybe if it works out well, maybe we could even add more money into it, because providing good security footage will help our community in the long run, I think.
Absolutely. Okay.
Just a comment, and I totally agree with Councillor Corbeil with regards to, there's some stuff here that we can't not do.
Absolutely.
But, you know, experience has taught us all that we'll go through this and probably be over, and we'll actually go through everything again and either add or take some stuff out. So it's not just once through the list. So
For sure.
there'll be lots of chat and, yeah. So there are some items in here that we can't say no to. So.
Absolutely. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. It's unfortunate that we're trying to vote on a program that's just been launched, so we don't have any way to rate its success or not. So I'm kind of having difficulty with saying, yes, it's a great idea without knowing how successful the program is.
Fair enough. Good comment.
We can always keep the funds.
That's right.
Don't have to spend it.
Okay, well, I think it's easier if we just vote, so I'll call the question on that. Everyone in favor of the Security Enhancement Program funding? Thank you. We're going to vote on all of them. Opposed?
I'm not opposed to it.
Fair enough. Sure.
I agree.
Item number 2 is our planning OCP update. Councillor Solda.
I believe we need to update our OCP. It's been a while. And with all the new development and all that's happening in this community, we need to do it. It's the last city planner, he tried, it was on the side of his desk. He had so much on his plate, and I think we need to move forward with this.
Councillor Poon.
I question how closely we're following our OCP and whether updating it will make us follow it.
Councillor Paulson.
I would like to move that we defer this to 2020, and I agree that the official community plan, we need to go over it and we need to make changes and update it. With the new council, I think we're going to be uber busy, you know, doing our strategic plan and so on. So I think if we were to defer that to 2020, it makes sense to me. It gives everybody a chance to get their feet wet and know where we're at. So just my thoughts.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Okay, Councillor Solda.
I'm going to just talk about that. I could go with that, but I would like to see some money put in for the next year before we go ahead and have some in the kitty, so it's not going to tax burden the whole all at once. But I think we need to do a strategic plan, and with the new OCP, no, strategic plan, we need to do one ourselves, and we also have a new city planner, so it would be great for her to get her feet wet. But I still like to see a little bit of money put into a fund just to have, so we won't hit the taxpayers all at once, even if it's half put away, and then go with the next plan.
CAO.
Madam Mayor, that's a good segue into the input from our manager planning, who couldn't be here today. She's not feeling well. Ms. McDougall is obviously new to the organization. She expressed to me last week concerns about misleading council, maybe that $40,000 could do a whole new OCP. $40,000 will get us basically an update of our existing OCP. And if we want to rewrite an OCP, that's more like $80,000. And she also would like to not undertake that project tomorrow. Because she's new, she would like to be on the ground a little longer, develop relationships in the community a little better, and undertake an OCP at the earliest by mid-year. And so that's her input that she was going to bring to you today. So if you envision a total rewrite, that would be about $80,000. If you're comfortable with a refresh of the existing, $40,000. And either way, staff would prefer that we don't start this project until at least midway through the year.
Okay, so at this point, we have a motion to defer this project to 2020. Councillor Paulson, are you intending that that means defer it to our options list for 2020 or add it into the budget for 2020?
I think we could defer it to the options list again in 2020. I mean, I agree with Councillor Solda that it would be good to carry some money forward, but I think when we see the reality at the end of going through this list, there's probably not going to be any money to carry forward. But I think in order to give our planning department and everybody else just a chance to really get entrenched in their jobs, it makes sense for next year.
Okay, so, and I've been,
And the $80,000 is another yikes.
I've been a big supporter of doing a new OCP, but I do think that 2020, if we intend to do it in 2020, I think that's a comfortable part in our terms as well, given that we've had a year on council together as well. So I think there's value in waiting till 2020 for this project. So that said, on the question, all in favor? Carried. The next project we have, we're down to the fire department. So fire hall door access hardware.
I move to adopt that.
Okay, is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Any questions to include this in our budget? $5,000. All in favor? Carried. And the next one is the fire hall HVAC controls upgrade. Councillor Solda?
I'll move to defer it for 2020 in the options list.
I'll second that.
Second.
You must be reading my mind.
Ooh. I don't know, I was
I
accused
don't
that
think
long.
so.
I'm blushing.
Any comments or questions on the move to defer this to our 2020 options list? Okay, all in favor? Carried. And moving on to transportation services, we have a new vehicle for the Director of Engineering and Public Works, $35,000, and that is coming from IRF. Could I just clarify, is this a vehicle that's been saved for in IRF, or is this just a withdraw from IRF?
This would be a withdrawal from IRF. It is not a replacement vehicle, it's a new one,
Okay.
unless we go back 25 years or so.
Okay. CAO?
Madam Mayor, another option for council to consider is that we could go with a hybrid model. We have two vehicles that are pluggable hybrids that we've had a lot of success with, and staff feel that we could have success with another one in this position. The budget would go up to $45,000, but looking at the Director of Finance, there is potential that we could fund that through the carbon fund. Council will recall that may recall that we have a project on the books for $100,000, a solar project, and if this council wants to discontinue that project, we could free that money up and draw from that. So that's an option for you.
Do we have money without making the decision on, in the carbon fund, without making the decision on the 100,000 for solar panels, just because this council hasn't had any information on it yet?
No, we would have to take the 45 from that 100.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Poon?
Is there any reason, what's the reason that this car needs to cost $35,000, and how much mileage is this car going to be used in a year?
Madam Mayor, the price that's in the budget, $35,000, is envisioned to be price of a new, smaller two-wheel drive vehicle. And a $45,000 pluggable hybrid would be not unlike one of the vehicles we see in the parking lot, but they're more expensive, obviously. The mileage used, I couldn't guess on that. It would be used by the Director of Engineering and Public Works.
Councillor Solda?
Yeah, two questions, Madam Mayor. First of all, if we went with a hybrid, we'd need a plug-in system, so where would we, would have to put one down at the works yard, or is there one down there? And second is the vehicles. Do we not have any vehicles that are not in use that we sometimes need the key and we start up the vehicle? I mean, can he not use another vehicle in the city?
Madam Mayor, we don't have a fleet vehicle currently not being used. In fact, the Director is currently driving a vehicle. Well, up until this week, he's been driving a vehicle for a position that's committed to a position that was vacant, and we populated last week. So we don't have a fleet vehicle that's available for it. There are fleet vehicles at City Hall that are generally used by IT, and I think it would be restrictive to have staff not be able to leave the building if the vehicle was already out, as an example. I think this is a position that needs to be able to get in the field when he needs to get in the field. For example, the director is regularly out to the sewer lagoons managing that project or being involved in that project.
So to add to that, would you need a 4x4? Because if you're going out on the field, then doesn't that bring up the little cost more? And
My preference would be that the director would be driving an all-wheel drive or a four-wheel drive vehicle. And I can tell you from experience, 2 years ago, I think it was, he was restricted at home during a snowstorm, and because he was driving a two-wheel drive vehicle. And I think there's positions in the city that we especially need during emergency times or during times when the weather's inclement, and this is one of those.
so, Madam Mayor? So my question is, $35,000, is that enough? Or if we went with, we must have 4x4s in the city that could be utilized for him, and then utilize a $35,000 or $20,000 car? Do you follow where I'm going with
I
that?
follow where you're going, and two thoughts. One, I spoke with the superintendent of our fleet today, or maintenance today, and he told me that he thinks this budget figure is for a front-wheel drive or two-wheel drive vehicle. I think this person needs a four-wheel drive vehicle, first of all. Secondly, and I don't mean this to sound flippant, but council shouldn't presume that staff hasn't already looked at these other options. And I know you have to ask the questions, and I'm going to provide the answers, but we have looked at other opportunities. When it snows or when there's weather events like we saw a few weeks ago, all of our four-wheel drives are on the road. And we've got four-wheel drives committed to positions, job positions that need four-wheel drives. For example, City Works, the vehicle that goes out to the water intakes is a four-wheel drive. And some of the other vehicles, like the street superintendent, I think is still driving a two-wheel drive vehicle. So the ones that are in town sometimes are two-wheel drives. But we do need to have a base number of four-wheel drives so we can be operational when we need to be.
And I don't disagree with you on the 4x4. That's
Yeah,
why I
thanks.
asked that question. I'm just disagreeing maybe on the cost. I don't know.
Sure, yeah.
And the second is that the public doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So I might know some of it, but not all
I
of it.
appreciate that, thank you.
I've got a list of people to speak. So first, Councillor Corbeil.
Well, most of what I was thinking was just answered. I too believe it should be a four-wheel drive, and $35,000 is pretty close, I would suspect. And I'm sure people get called out in the winter and, the worst conditions, and wouldn't expect them to have to call somebody to borrow their truck. So I totally agree that we should be looking at a four-wheel drive.
Councillor Poon.
I don't think we should go higher than 35,000, but I think the $35,000 budget should be able to stretch to a four-wheel drive vehicle.
Councillor Paulson.
I'm just going to throw this out there, but I'd like to remove this from the list. And let's go back to the hybrid model, which I think is the way to go in the future anyway. And come back with a report on maybe cost and whether or not we can actually apply that to the carbon fund as a way of funding, if we could.
Is there a seconder for that? Okay, and Councillor Solda.
Yeah. So my question is, if you went with a hybrid, are they 4x4s? And what happens when you're out in nowhere land with the 4x4 hybrid and it's done?
Sure, and we can bring you, if you direct us to bring back a report, we'll bring that answer. I was told today that Toyota, who I think make a RAV4, now have a hybrid version. And we've been using, are you driving one?
I drive one.
And we've been using pluggable hybrids, and so those, we plug them in overnight at City Hall, they charge a battery, and our experience has been all the traffic, virtually all the traffic, the miles that are put on, the mileage is on battery, which is great. But they also have a gasoline engine, so if you run out of battery charge, the engine kicks in, which is different than a full-on electric car that when you're done with the battery, you're done, and it just stops. So these have an engine and a battery. They're a hybrid.
Sure, still need gas. So I would just like to add to this that I don't agree with the practice of drawing from IRF for something we haven't saved for in IRF. I know that this is a relatively small amount, but I think we need to be very cautious of taking money out of IRF that we haven't contributed to IRF for. And I think if we do it with one small vehicle, then we do it with another, and we start using it just as a fund to pull from when the money in IRF is attributed to different purchases. So I like the idea of a hybrid, and if we can get a better idea of, or make sure it's applicable for this position and then get a better idea of the cost, I think that would be great, and bring this back at a subsequent budget meeting. So,
Can I add one
Councillor
more
Solda?
before you call the question, Madam Mayor? When you come back with a report, I would like to know, like, the cost for repairs and that. Have we, in the past, had a lot of repairs on our vehicles that are hybrid? Because I don't know enough about them, so I can't answer that question.
We can bring that information back.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I would suspect our current hybrids are still under warranty.
They're new.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, on that motion, all in favor? Carried. The next item is LED lighting upgrades for parking lots, and there's a number of parking lots indicated. Council, any comments? Councillor Poon.
Well, I question whether this is really needed because 15,000 goes a long way for electricity.
Councillor Paulson?
Just going back to when this was originally presented to us, and I think a 4-year payback was quoted on the investment. It's an area that we need to get to, and we need to get it done. I guess my question around this is, have we thoroughly, in LED lighting upgrades and stuff like that, there's got to be grants and stuff available. And I'm just wondering if I know there's no Power Smart grants right now, but there has to be other grants available. I'm just wondering if the grants to offset this cost have been exhausted, let's put it that way.
I think that staff did at the last meeting comment on different types of grants that they feel are available for this. And I can't remember what grants were mentioned. 15, yeah, and I think it was noted that it was roughly a 7-year payback for these.
I don't
If
know
I
why
remember correctly.
I wrote down 4 for some reason, but I
I
could
think
be
it
wrong.
was 7. I think I'm right on that one, for sure. Councillor Poon?
I think we should consider that LED technology is still changing and it's getting cheaper. And if 4 years down the road we decide to do it, it may cost us half of what we're budgeting right now.
Yeah, and just to add to that, and I mean, it has gotten cheaper. A few years ago, we put, I think, a $70,000 street lighting project into our budget, and the year before it was $100,000, and then it did come down in cost and more grants became available. CAO?
Madam Mayor, if council would like, so this project could be paid for from Carbon Fund as well. If council would like us to maybe sit tight and wait for grant opportunities to emerge, you could not fund this now from general, and if council would leave money in the Carbon Fund that was available when the time comes to match, for example, then we could make a grant application when that arises and come back mid-year with a project.
I think that sounds great. Councillor Solda?
Just a quick question, Madam Mayor. First question is it safety? Are we looking at safety? Can we live without it? I mean, we obviously have lights there now, but can we live? So if it's a matter of safety and no holds about it, let's move on. But maybe the CAO can, or somebody can comment.
CAO?
As the mayor has just mentioned, we've done previous projects. We've had good success in changing to LEDs, and there's a quality of lighting issue a little bit, but for the most part, it's around conservation. And we've had good success in terms of payback and like with considerable reductions in power bills. So this, in my mind, this is more about doing the right thing in terms of conservation than about safety.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Paulson?
Just with regards to safety and vision and stuff, outside my kitchen window, I can see the lights that have been done on Argyle Street, kind of in front of the Paramount Theatre. And the first light down 6th Avenue is a BC Hydro pole that's not done. And there's a distinct difference in the illumination, especially down on the street. And the thing about LED lighting, you can really make it directional and you can actually adjust the power and stuff like that. But out my kitchen window, there is a definite difference in color light, white light as opposed to brown light, and it's a place we want to be.
For sure. Okay, so Council, I'm going to suggest that we wait for grant opportunities and consider funding this through the Carbon Fund when those grants come up. Would somebody like to second that?
I'll second that.
Don't we have a motion on the floor?
I don't think we made one.
No? Okay.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. And the next one is street lighting upgrade on main roads. Questions, comments on this one?
What
Councillor-
is- oh.
Sorry, Councillor Corbeil first.
Well, I think this is something that we have to look at closely, especially in intersections, and it should probably be an ongoing project to ensure that well-used intersections are well lit. We've heard over and over again from different presenters and letters to council on the difficulty of seeing pedestrians, especially at night and in the rainy season. So this, to me, really does smack of a safety issue and something we should look at quite seriously.
Councillor Poon.
Well, I think we should prioritize those areas that are not at all lit and start from there.
Councillor Solda.
A couple of things, Madam Mayor. So a question is, how many are left to upgrade on our street lighting now? Is this the existing lighting or adding more lighting? So maybe we can get a comment on that, and then I have something else to say.
Madam Mayor, my recollection from what the Director of Engineering and Public Works told us at the last meeting was that we've done the street lights that we can in terms of changing out bulbs and whatnot. So it's a bit of a challenge for us to encourage Hydro to do the ones that they manage. So I believe, I recall him saying that this would be for adding new lights where there are none. Our Superintendent of Streets is in the room. I don't know if you can add to that, Brian, on street lights.
You have to come up to the mic.
Remember to turn the mic on. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. So the last grant that we had took care of all the ones that were our responsibility throughout town. And we haven't had anything come from BC Hydro that they want to match any of the ones that they own.
So,
Councillor Solda?
Madam Mayor, so are we replacing BC Hydros, or are we adding?
Just
Ours.
our own.
Okay, so Madam Mayor, I'm going to move this recommendation. I think safety and basically might help with the RCMP for lighting in different areas in our community might be a good thing, so I'm going to move this.
Okay, is there a seconder? Okay, and comments? Yeah, Councillor Paulson.
I'm just a little confused on this one. This one does not fall under the LED lighting. So street lighting upgrade, main roads. I'm taking this to be that we're installing new poles and increasing our lighting. Does that make sense on this line item, or?
CAO.
Madam Mayor, this item came in. I asked the director to put something in about brightening streets because I was hearing from members of council about concerns about the streets not being bright enough. And his first response was, how do we do that short of installing new lights? So that's what this is new. I believe he told us he'd be installing new arms and new lights if he could in certain locations.
Okay, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. Our community is known for being very dark, and we have a lot of fog and a lot of rainy months, so I think this is a good idea. I support it.
Okay. Councillor Poon.
So I see it's 50,000. How many lights does that give us?
I'd have to get back to you on what we can do there.
Thank you. So, Council, I am in support of the motion, and I would suggest that we put the money in the budget with the direction that we're looking at this as a way to improve the safety in some of the areas of town, and let staff decide where they see the greatest needs with that direction. So I don't think that's a decision that council needs to make, where the lights are going to be, but generally we're looking at this as a way to improve the safety of the streets. Okay, any further questions or comments? Yeah, for sure. All in favor? Carried. Welcome, Councillor Washington. We've made most of the decisions without you. That's right. Next up is traffic circle engineering study. Comments from council. Councillor Haggard.
I don't think traffic is that busy enough in our community to warrant the cost of a study and further warrant the cost of implementing it, so I'm not in favor of a traffic circle study.
Councillor Solda.
I'd like to make a motion to take it off of the list.
I'll
second that.
Okay, and I'll just add that I think this came as a piece of the recommendations and the ask that came from the Uptown merchants. And I think there's definitely value potentially in using traffic circles in our community, but I think that this is something that should come potentially after our strategic planning if we see this type of project as a priority for going forward. So good to have it on here for this year, but I'm comfortable with taking it off and bringing it back if necessary. All in favor? Carried. Okay, and on to paving, we have Bird Street, 16th Avenue to Estevan Drive. CAO.
Madam Mayor, can I just interject here? We had a question from a neighbor on 6th Avenue today around the 6th Avenue paving project from 2018 and why it's not on the projects list. And the reason is that the funding was set aside last year, and the reason is that project has begun. Some work was started in 2018 on 6th Avenue, and the way we track these things, if a project has begun, it doesn't reflect here as a carryover project because it's already started. So I'm going to ask Brian and maybe Kathy to speak to that, just so there's clarity for the neighbors.
Sure.
If that's all right, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
So 6th Avenue is a project that we carried over from last year that was not completed. We got a portion of done, but nowhere near completed to where we originally had up the scope of the work. So we are planning on carrying on with that project this year. Design-wise, we have pretty much from Angus to Melrose done. But we also, when you're separating, we also looked at, we're already separated east of that on 9th Avenue. So you'll also see on there that we've got another branch of pipe now heading from Montrose up to 9th Avenue, which will take a huge amount of stormwater out of our system. And every time you build this out, you can get pinch zones. So you're taking a large amount of water into two smaller pipes that all just travel in one. So we plan this year on going from Angus down to Melrose to complete that portion of 6th Avenue. And we also want to go from Montrose up to 9th because we're already separated on 9th Avenue.
Okay. And the money's in the budget from last year?
For the 6th Avenue?
Yes.
Yeah, and then you'll see the other one in this year's
Thank you.
budget.
Okay, wonderful. Councillor Paulson.
Just clarification, was there not money set aside from Argyle to Angus as well?
There is some money on, but the design for that
Isn't done yet, okay.
isn't completely done yet. There's two water mains there. Also, you look at, there's fall going back towards Argyle on that section for storm. So there's a bit of different design stuff that needs to be done in that little section as well.
I want to know when my street's going to be closed. No, I'm just kidding.
CAO.
Madam Mayor, I just want to be really crystal clear that we're talking about pipes in the ground and paving between Melrose and Angus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, great. Councillor Solbach.
So just to clarify that too, we're talking about $60,000, right? And additional paving, but
So
there's.
Now we are
Yeah.
going to be, but what they're talking about is
Is
a
something else.
project from last year.
Okay, so,
Yes.
because I'm really big in, let's get our streets fixed and working on that, I'm going to move actually both of them. Do you mind if I do go
That's
like
fine,
that?
yeah.
The 60,000 and the 100,000, I'm going to move that.
The Bird Street and additional paving.
That's
paving.
correct.
Second, are there questions or comments on this? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay, and on to storm projects. We have Montrose 6th Avenue to 9th Avenue and 8th Avenue Dogwood to Cedarwood. Council, questions, comments? Include both?
And I'll second that, and I have a
Second.
question.
Councillor Solda.
So the storm is actually replacing and not just patching, right, on the storm improvements?
The project from up to 9th Avenue would be a new pipe that would
Oh.
separate what was an individual pipe, because we're separated up there. The other one on the Cedarwood is a pipe that's failing in the system.
Okay.
So we'd be replacing that failed pipe.
Okay, I'm happy with that.
Okay, any further comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Sorry, opposed? No opposed. Traffic upgrades. We have traffic signal head LED upgrades. Anyone on council need a refresher of what this was?
I was just
I
going to
do.
ask that question, thank you.
CAO?
I'm going to ask Mr. Mosley to answer that if he can.
Great.
Are you able to?
Just general, what this project is. We don't remember.
Some of our old traffic devices are, they're not failing, but they need to be upgraded. So it's an upgrade of some of our traffic systems.
Okay. Councillor Solda?
Just a quick one, a question. Didn't we do all our traffic lights or is it just the heads, they die after a while, or I don't know.
Some of it's the lights and some of it's the programming into the lights.
It's the computers. Okay, so I'll move that, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder? And Councillor Hager, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say, it sounds like this is another safety issue, so I think that's something we need to approve.
Great. Okay. Councillor Poon?
But, okay, if we replace traffic signals with traffic circles, then we wouldn't have to maintain them, right?
That's right.
Don't get me started.
I hear they cause more accidents than they prevent. Okay, on including this $20,000 in our budget, all in favor? Carried. None opposed. Thank you. Okay, on to works other. The first one we have is the Grandview Walkway, 385 meters, and this is additional cost to the $100,000 that is already in our budget for this from last year. Total project cost $125,000. Council. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Do we really have time for that project this year? I mean, we just scoped through everything else. I'm just wondering, is it something that are we honestly going to get to it in 2019?
We have a busy year right now as we are, so we try and get to the projects that are there for sure, but we'll be busy.
So, Councillor Paulson.
I don't know why in the shoulder here I have a question mark. There might have been maybe some discussion around gas tax for 2020 for this project. I don't know why I wrote this in the
Maybe just your thought.
I've got the same note.
Okay. CAO?
Madam Mayor, I think there was a discussion at the last meeting about whether or not this was eligible for gas tax funds, and Kathy's telling us it is, and it's a matter of how much gas tax is a fund, how many funds are available.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question on the gas tax. Would all these projects on, the Beaver Creek widening and all that be eligible for the gas tax?
Everything that's eligible comes up to about $342,000. We have $100,000 available.
Okay.
And you've approved 37.5 so far.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Limited funds.
Yes.
Yes.
So, Madam Mayor?
Yep.
I'm going to defer it for the following year since we were just told that the budget, the work, they have enough on their plate too. So I'm going to defer it at this moment.
Okay, you're going to make a motion to defer
Yes,
it until 2020 options list?
Correct.
Second, Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wonder if either one of those projects can tie in with our bike path. Is there any money left in our bicycle path fund that we could make the Grandview Walkway a bike path plus a walkway, or even the Beaver Creek thing to get that, if there's any bike money left?
I'm thinking that our bike funds were grants that we got that were allocated for specific projects, so we probably can't, I would imagine. I don't think we actually have a fund for them from memory. CAO?
Distant memory, sorry. We had some bike funds or bike path funds budgeted, but it turned out that the scope of the project was way beyond what was originally budgeted, and the previous council canceled that one. And then I believe there was some grant funds available, but they expired from ICBC, maybe?
Project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So the short answer is no, there isn't any.
Thank you. So just clarifying here. We have a motion to move the $25,000 to the 2020 budget, or to the 2020 options list, sorry. We have $100,000 in our budget that was funded through 2018. Are we keeping that in the budget for 2020 potentially, or are we taking that out and reallocating it and considering the whole project in 2020? Councillor Solda.
Are you referring to everything on the,
No, I'm referring just to the Grandview
To the
Road
Grandview.
project. So we put, our
Okay.
last council put $100,000 for that project into the 2019 budget. We funded it in 2018. So there's $100,000 sitting waiting for this project. It's a $125,000 project. So are we putting $125,000 on the options list and reallocating that $100,000 now, considering the project next year? Or was the motion to keep that $100,000 there and just put this $25,000 next year?
I would like to see what we are going to spend and then be able to move it around if we have to. I don't know, you know, like, because you were last council, and I don't know, maybe the old council can give us more suggestions here.
Okay, I'm going to start with Councillor Poon.
I would like to see the 125,000 in the 2020 budget
On the options list.
on the options list. Can I make a motion?
Not yet. We
No.
got to
Got a
deal with this
motion.
one first, unless we want to make an amendment. Councillor Washington.
You make it.
I think we as a city should leave it where it is, because if you want to go there and do a walkabout on that road, it is pretty darn dangerous. Like, the kids have no place to go when they're coming home from school. We've got to do something before somebody gets hurt, or even worse. But even if we left 100,000 there just to get something going, if we could just start clearing a path, or start doing something, but something has to be done out there before somebody gets hurt.
Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Washington. Both of those projects, you know, there's a number of kids going to school, to A.W. Neal School, and, you know, I haven't been by those areas lately to take a good look, but my memory serves me that there isn't a lot of room to walk, so, you know, I would like not to say no and maybe review this at our next budget meeting, because I tend to agree that I think this is quite a safety concern.
Councillor Sola.
So maybe here's a throw out for everybody. Maybe we defeat the motion and go ahead with the project. And it might be later, much later in the year that it happens, but it's deferred. And I remember going to Neil, and the little shoulder that you got to walk on, and now that the schools have become junior high, Neil is now junior, like an elementary, and schools have changed and reconfigured. Maybe the idea is to defeat the motion.
Councillor Haggard.
By the City Works own admission, they probably won't be able to get to the project this year anyway, so I agree with Councillor Poon. We should defer it until 2020, the full amount.
Okay, so we have a motion right now to defer the $25,000 specifically, which would leave the $100,000 currently in our budget to 2020. So I'm going to call the question first on that. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, so we have not deferred that to 2020. So we have $100,000 currently in our budget for this. Would somebody like to move adding the rest of this project to our budget?
So moved.
Okay, and I will just comment that my only concern on this project, and I do agree that there is a safety issue there. My concern on this project is that this is not necessarily our greatest safety priority as a community, and we've been told that by staff. The reason we're looking at this project is because it came to us through neighbor concerns. And I think that that's just not necessarily the best way for us to make decisions. I would like to see us, and in this case, you know, we've got $100,000 in the budget for it already. I would suggest we just move forward with the project, but I think in the future, we need to task our staff to bring us the most important projects, to bring us a list of safety concerns that they have, and not take projects on a neighborhood basis, because I think it sets a bad standard for how we make our decisions. If, you know, a group of neighbors has to get together and write letters and then we'll fund their projects, I think we should fund them based on safety priority from our staff. Councillor Solda.
So, Madam Mayor, maybe when we do the next budget next year, that this could be part of the budget process. I would agree with that.
Sure. Okay, on the question to add $25,000 to the budget for this project. All in, add the 25,000, the 100,000 is already in the budget. This year. Even if it doesn't get done this year, put the money in. Are we all clear?
Yep.
Okay. So the motion is to add $25,000 into the budget this year. The 100,000 for the rest of the project is already funded from 2018.
Mm-hmm.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And the next project, Beaver Creek widening, Pineo to Compton, additional cost for paved shoulder instead of gravel, $25,000. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I noticed on the line there, gas tax. Is there gas tax for this one? It is gas tax money we're using?
Yes, we started with 100. You've allocated 37.5, so
Okay.
there's still room.
So along with the Grandview project, I would like to see the Beaver Creek widening too.
And can I just clarify, this is already being widened. This is just additional cost to pave it instead of have it gravel, 25,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's, but there is also, we still have to work on getting a little bit of land from First Nations with that project.
Okay.
So there's an ongoing conversation on getting what we need to put that project in.
Okay. Councillor Solda.
What would be nice if the government did to carry on with the bike lanes, to have a bike lane in that area would be really great, and makes you wonder if the government's going to come out with more money allocated for that kind of projects. I don't know. Yeah. So I'm going to move this project.
Okay, is there a seconder? Second. Councillor Poon?
Oh, you were saying that we still need to get land from First Nations, so why don't we get that land first before we budget it?
Okay. Other comments or questions? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You say there's gravel there already, so it's not it is a safety issue, but not quite as hazardous. And I agree with Councillor Poon that perhaps we should get our ducks, get things a little more finalized before we commit that 25, and then once it happens, we can throw it in there and get her done. And in the meantime, investigate a bike path too.
Yeah, I like the idea of a bike lane there. Councillor Corbeil.
Can I just ask a question? If we delay the paving, will the gravel have to be replaced and squared up and pounded down and all the rest of it?
It will be compacted as it's completed, but there will be some maintenance required on it going forward, yep.
Okay. CAO.
Madam Mayor, I maybe I'm the only one confused, but I think we're mixing this project up with a Grandview project in terms of gravel versus paving. I
No.
recall the director telling us that, I get there's $25,000 there, and it says paved shoulder instead of gravel. There isn't existing gravel there, so there is no existing shoulder. We have to build a shoulder and widen. And it just, maybe you already understood that, and I'm the only one who didn't, but there isn't, we don't think there's a safe walkway there now. And so this project involves building out a shoulder and then paving that. Now, and I'm looking at
There's
Brian.
some culvert extensions as well on that.
And did we fund this project in 2018, and this is additional funds to that?
The project is funded and approved in 2016.
So this is additional to those funds.
Okay. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I'm just kind of curious to know how much dialogue, or have we had any dialogue with the First Nations yet that's needed?
CAO.
Madam Mayor, we've had considerable dialogue. There are two properties in two cases, this widening impacts private property on First Nations lands. And so there's the First Nation is communicating with the landowners of those two properties. And so it's been a very challenging, the road right-of-way is very narrow there, and the road is not centered in the right-of-way. So at one point, the edge of pavement is actually right at the property line. And so we're having to interact with the landowner to see if we can encroach on the private land to widen the street.
Okay. So the way that I read it is there's going to be a shoulder regardless, gravel. We want to pave it, but it sounds to me like you may be saying there's not going to be a shoulder, a safe shoulder for walking unless we do this project.
I think what I'm saying is
Yes,
there currently is not a shoulder. We need to undertake that project, and staff are telling us we need $25,000 more to do it.
Okay, great. That's
Is
an
that fair,
important
Brian?
distinction.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Poon?
So, can I clarify this? So, what you're saying is we need to get permission from the landowners before we even have any scope of having a shoulder, right?
Yeah, we need to get approval, so that the people we're dealing with, the First Nations, want this as well, but they just need to get approval from some of the landowners for us to encroach on their property.
So there is a possibility that there will not be a shoulder.
We need them to agree, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Solda?
If I, recollection of Beaver Creek Road, there's ditches on each side, right? So can you, not all of the ditches are on both sides? Or is it just one? It's been a long time since I've been to school.
Yeah, we would need to fill in and build out, extend a few culverts, fill in and build out.
So can't you just cover a ditch? I mean, you can't just cover it with dirt and pile it in dirt. I know you have to put
Just cover it.
culverts in.
There's no backside to the ditch. It's just, essentially, it just drops off from the road. So you
Okay.
need to fill it in a bit so you can stabilize the path.
So whose property is that? Ours?
The majority of is ours, but there's a couple of portions along that way that doesn't belong to us. It belongs
Doesn't
to the
have
First
anything.
Nations. So we need to get permission from them to encroach on their property to build out those two areas, Tim?
Yes,
Two areas.
there's a right-of-way through a First Nations reserve, and, but in 2 instances, we need to encroach on privately owned property on reserve.
Okay.
So it's
So-
it's a very convoluted conversation.
So, we need to move forward on this,
Yep.
so, yeah.
Great.
Good.
Okay. Councillor Haggard?
I was just going to comment that if we're not ready to go yet, why can we not defer this until 2020? It sounds like this is going to be quite the process. It's not going to be a simple thing to do.
I think a lot of it sounds like to me like a lot of the work has already been done. Conversations are ongoing. Hoopajessid, it sounds like, is, reasonably supportive, just working out final details. Okay. Councillor Poon?
Well, talking is free, so why don't we keep talking about it and get an agreement on paper before we actually budget the work?
Okay. So I'm going to call the question because I think we've had sufficient dialogue on this $25,000. So on whether or not to add this to this year's budget. If not, it will just come back in next year's budget, or if, an agreement is reached and we need to allocate funds. So on adding it to this year's budget, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and the next one is the Gertrude Street Bridge, which we're calling the Roger Creek Bridge now, project for $200,000. Council, are there any questions on this project? Okay.
Okay, Madam Mayor,
Okay.
I'll move the project to go ahead because there's no choice. We need to do it. So I'll move it.
I'll second that. Any questions or comments? Councillor Paulson?
I want this to go forward as quickly as possible as well, but having said that, if I remember, the comment was this is not impending doom. It could be done next year or the year after or the year after, but it is something we need to invest in our bridges. And we'll probably come back and talk about that after we're done the whole project. So, because we'll be, there's always applying some of it this year and some of it next year to kind of split costs and those sorts of things. But I'm fully aware that that bridge needs to be done. Actually, I walked underneath that bridge on a tour, and there's stuff that's going to have to be done here within the next 5 years.
Councillor Solda.
My concern, if we don't do it, the cost is going to go up, and you know what happens, it's not going to be cheaper, and it's going to go higher and higher, and staff will end up patching it, and we'll have to go back and fixing it. It's not their fault that they have to patch it, because it's not in the budget, so let's just do it.
Any further comments? Okay, on adding the project to the budget, all in favor? Carried. And the next project is the line painting machine, power driver and trailer. Councillor Haggard.
Is this a new machine or is it replacing an old machine?
It's a new piece of equipment that is easier on the operators to do the painting.
Okay. Councillor Cordial.
I think we heard before that there's been a number of city employees injured having to move around what you use right now. Is that correct?
Some minor tweaks. So this is part of trying to resolve that.
Okay. Councillor Solda.
Yeah, with all the lines in the city on the streets and that, I'm going to move this project. I think this piece of equipment, I think it's a good piece.
Is there a
to have.
seconder? And just clarification, we currently contract out our street lines, I believe. I think when we heard about this project, it was more for parking lots and parking lines. Would we still be contracting the bulk of our street line repainting? Okay, fair enough.
I'm good.
Okay. Councillor Haggard?
Thank you. If we're currently contracting out to do the lines on the streets, can we not contract the same person to do the parking lots then? Instead of spending $12,000?
Give CAO or go ahead. Either.
Usually within our scope of works, we do that works, and then some of the larger stuff that goes beyond what we're capable of doing is what we look to contract out.
CAO, did you have anything to add to that?
Just echo that comment that our practice is currently to contract out what we call long line painting. Those are the ones who drive along the road painting the street lines, but the city does the bulk of the other, or all of the other painting ourselves. And this isn't expanding the scope of our work, it's just providing better equipment for our employees to prevent injuries.
Councillor Solda.
I believe that if we contract this particular thing out, like our driveways and stuff like that, it would cost a lot more. So I think this is a good cost.
Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That was my comment too. For $12,000, he could burn that up awful quick for somebody else doing his line painting. So I think this thing will pay for itself in no time.
I think we have to remember that our staff are still painting the lines though.
Yep.
So when we say it's cheaper, it's not, we don't really have the information to comment on whether it's cheaper or more effective at this point to contract it out, but just on what our current practice is. Councillor Poon?
The contractor that we're using, are they local?
No.
No, they're not local.
And I think that's because there's not a local company that does it,
Correct.
if I remember correctly. CAO?
Madam Mayor, just maybe stepping back from that question a bit, this budget doesn't envision contracting out any work currently done by our unionized employees, nor does it envision making inroads with our unionized employees into what we currently contract. If council would like us to consider that or either of those moves, we should step back from that and bring you back a report on what that would look like. If you're interested in a report on what contracting of this piece of work would look like and what the ramifications are, we could bring that report.
Okay. Is there a will on council to have that report? Okay, wonderful. I'm going to call the question on the $12,000 inclusion in the budget then. All in favor? And opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay. On to parks. So our first project is Parks Upgrade Paper Mill Dam Stairs. Councillor Paulson.
This falls under the guise of safety issue, and I would like to move that it is included.
I'll second that.
Any comments? Councillor Haggard?
This is one of the items that Director Thorpe had indicated was a need, so I think we have to prove it.
For sure. Director Thorpe?
Madam Mayor, if I may bring council's attention to, before we look line by line, just a reminder from the previous budget meeting, the 5 projects that I indicated based on urgency due to safety. So first would be the Paper Mill Dam stairs at $10,000. Secondly, upgrading the Penny Lane Bridge at $20,000. Third, the Russell Field light pole repairs at $10,000. And then down under Parks, Recreation and Facilities, the Gyro Center security cameras at $10,000. And finally, the Echo Fieldhouse furnace number 1 at $6,600.
Was that second to last one the Gyro Center security cameras?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we have, Councillor Poon?
I'd like to know, these stairs, what does it provide access to?
The river.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. What it is the stairs that are on the beachfront that are going up to the top parking lot area and to another area where people go fish. So it goes above the falls. So it's access up there for a lot of fishermen use it, instead of using our back road through our lot where we put our refusal soils.
So if these stairs were closed, would there still be a way to get to where people go?
It'd be a long way around, but yes, they could. But it's more a safety. It's quite steep, so it'd be a safety issue for sure.
Okay, seeing no further comments, all in favor? Carried. The next one is park upgrades playground eating area for Harbor Key. Councillor Solda?
Can I just get a refresher exactly what, it was to put a roof on? I can't remember. Could you just upgrade me on that or give me more detail?
Sure. It's where the playground is. We
Yep.
just finished putting in a brand new aluminum windbreak and new glass. And currently, for 8 to 10 months a year, we have a 20 by 20 canvas tent that's set up that our crew sets up all the time and takes down all the time. And it's a well-used spot, and it's always used for the Spirit Square as well, and for events for bands and stuff. So it would be nice to have a permanent structure there.
So, Madam Mayor, I'm going to move this, and I'm going to tell you, I'll wait for a seconder, and I'll explain why I want to move this.
Okay, is there a seconder to include this in the budget?
Okay, so I used to be down there, I used to be a park specialist for Parks and Recreation, and being in the theater world, we used to do a lot of performances down at the square when it had a stage. We couldn't use it because it was just too hot, and what a waste. And we are all talking about the cruise ships, we're all talking about let's upgrade that particular area. Well, I think this would be a great upgrade, and this would be a great start. I know we're working on the clock and everything, so I think for more kids and to utilize it, if you've ever sat on those benches, it's hot and you can't sit there, so people leave. So that's why I am moving this.
And I will also design it so that it could be further developed, so it could, the roof line could actually be, lengthened along the area as well, along the playground as well. So right now we're proposing 20 by 20, but it could go to 20 by 60 sort of thing, so it could be added on in modules. So we'll do the roof design, so further advancement.
Okay, Councillor Haggard.
I think these are one of these items that's nice to have, but it's not urgent, so I would like to defer it until 2020.
Okay, so we have a motion right now to include it in this year's budget. And defeating it, I think, would bring it back to 2020, essentially. Not that we should make all of our decisions around this, but is this the kind of thing that would be finished before the cruise ships, or is this a longer-term project?
I do have one of the local welding companies actually designing it right now through our last budget. So actually looking at it, not designing it, sorry. But yeah, it wouldn't take much to get it done.
Okay. Any further comments or questions on this one? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Defeated? Okay, the next one is Penny Lane Bridge, which we're told is a priority. Could somebody tell me where Penny Lane Bridge is?
If you're playing, do you ever playing that frisbee golf?
Okay, yes.
Okay, the bridge that you're right there.
Okay,
So it'd be the
wonderful. Thank you.
lane that's between Echo and the corner.
Okay, wonderful. Counselor, would somebody like to add this into our budget?
Acceptance.
Okay, is there a seconder? Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, the next one we have is Blair Park Spray Electrical, $15,000. Counselor Solda,
I'll move that, Madam Mayor.
is there a seconder? Okay. Counselor Haggard?
If I remember correctly, this is, you have a partnership with the Rotary Club on this item?
It's one that they're willing to explore if it gets accepted, yes.
Okay, and Director Thorpe, did you have something to add?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, just to recap from the previous budget meeting as well, on the final page, we're discussing that there were two electrical panels. So this is the one for 15,000, and then you'll find as an addition to the options list at the bottom, the 16th Ave spray park. So I realize they're separate projects, but just to remind council, there was the question at last meeting about that there were two electrical panels we're considering.
Okay, Counselor Solda.
I have no problem deferring one and for the following year, and let's do one at a time. Whenever you drive by this particular park right now, I hear so many comments. Why is the water running? Nobody's in there, you know, and there's more and more. And we talk about conserving our water. Why is the city doing this when we're suddenly we can't use to water our gardens and suddenly, you know, and I think that we need to upgrade here. So I totally agree with this.
I would add that I think we should be doing both. And while we have one park where the water is running all the time, we have another spray park that doesn't get used and sits and kids don't play there because you have to go and get a key to turn it on. So I think if we have these assets in place, let's make it so that kids can play with them.
I will do a friendly amendment. There's no friendly amendments, I know, but I'll amend my motion to do this.
To include both.
To include both.
Okay, is there a seconder for that?
Second.
All right,
Okay.
you win.
I think we should have both. Comments? Councillor Haggard?
Could we hold off on this project until you make sure that you have the partnership with the Rotary Club?
Yep, that'd be one. And the shelter for the Victoria Key was the other one they were going to partnership in. And I think they've already put the money in for the budget of 218, but we wanted to wait for new council to approve our new wonderful addition that could be at Victoria Key.
Thank you. Any more comments on this one? So this is to include both, which I believe is $30,000. Okay.
Where is the other one again?
It's I think at the very end. Oh, you're working on an old budget, so you won't see it. Okay, council, all in favor for both? Opposed? Carried.
I'm only saying no because we're going to run out of money.
We are.
We'll just go back and do this
Right.
again.
So council, next we have several projects for Canal Beach. We can discuss them independently or all at once. Councillor Poon.
I think Canal Beach is underutilized at the moment, and the focal point right now should be the Harbor Key area. So I think we should put more money in SO Beach development instead of Canal Beach.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Paulson?
I'd like to defer the full ask for Canal Beach right
I'll
now
second that.
to 2020.
Okay. Councillor Washington?
Just a question for you. Would the Canal Waterfront Park washrooms be hinging on when Canadian Maritime Engineering gets pipes down that far?
I'm going to ask Brian and Rob to comment on that. Brian first, maybe.
Yeah.
Love that.
Great.
Yeah, so there's no sense forging ahead until we have water pipes and sewer pipes and things close by that we can tie into to make it washrooms instead of those porta potties that are getting used by their construction workers right now. And
Okay, thank you.
I do, I did a lot of research, and we do have a pump and haul system we could be brought in via B trains, that the foundation would actually be the septic tank, and the washrooms would be above with waterless, and we could solar power the lighting. So until we get to that further point, we could actually when we're installing it, we could actually hook a sewer pipe to that system, so that if it ever gets installed, we could actually connect to it. So I'm trying to do a couple things in case we're, 10, 20 years out here, so.
And to further that, Rob and I have been talking about that, as long as we have the right size footprint now for future pumps that you would need if and when the pipes get there. So.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
I would like to see a full plan of what Canal Beach could look like. It really intrigues me what you've got down here. It's a lot, and obviously would have to be phased in over a number of years. But I would agree, for the time being, it could be put off till next year. But I would love to see a full plan of what these different piers and floats would look like.
And after our last council meeting, I did hit up a contractor in town of an engineering that did our design for the pier if it was to happen. And the GPS model that he tried to go off of wouldn't work with his program, or I would have had it here for you today. Sorry.
Okay, Council, so we currently have a motion to defer these projects to 2020. I think the other value in that is that we can consider Canal Beach as kind of a greater project and piece of our strategic plan and where we want to put it on the priority list. So I definitely support that motion. Any further comments? Councillor Paulson.
Just a quick comment, and I'll reiterate what I talked about earlier in our earlier meeting is I really think that redecking the piers down there is chasing good money after bad. I do like the floating pier idea as an alternative, so you have access to the water. Decking that just gives you a platform to observe and really serves no purpose other than maybe even a hazard. Just saying.
I actually like the idea of decking it because I think it's nice to have just a viewing deck, but this is why we need to talk about it in strategic planning. Because there's, on council at least, we don't have a common vision for that space at this point. So on the motion, all in favor? Carried. And the next up is Victoria Key Shelter, $15,000. Councillor Haggard.
It sounds like we have a partnership already with the Rotary, so as long as we have a partnership, I think we should take advantage of that situation.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Paulson.
Just for clarification on that one, with the 50-50, would that be 50% of the cost of the 15 or another 15?
No, we'd be adding 15. It's for
it's a
current deck
$30,000
repairs that are needed now,
Yeah.
and plus new hand drilling. It's rotting away. It's probably over 20, 25 years old, so it needs to be done regardless. So this would be enhancing what's there and making the deck square instead of that.
So the overall project
Whatever
is 30
shape it
grand.
is.
Yeah, whatever shape it is. I was going to say,
The overall project is 30 grand.
correct.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Okay, so I think I heard a motion to add that in.
Yep.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Okay, any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
Mayor, and the Rotary Club would love to come and do their presentation to the next council meeting.
Wonderful.
Okay.
That'd be great. Okay, and next we have SO Beach Development, $100,000. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, we were discussing not to do the full development down on the SO Beach. We were till we see a plan, but we were also talking because of the cruise ships and just the summer coming and everything, that we were going to look at doing just sort of a gravel pocket park type of thing. So would it cost $100,000? What would be the actual price for something what we were discussing last budget?
Okay, so I'm going to first go to CAO or
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Deacon is working with the Cruise Ship Committee on a list of things that are recommended the city undertake. It might be a good time to hear from Mr. Deacon on what, so he's got a list of items, but we haven't identified budget numbers yet, but you might want to hear from him on that.
I
we would
like
love to. Come on up, Mr. Deacon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and councilors. So Aquila, who did the community cruise ship readiness training, also did a walkabout with us in the Harbor Key area. And they, much like council, said safety is highest priority. And to that end, they looked at things like there are little potholes or holes in the asphalt throughout Harbor Key. There's depressions in the area where water collects. They thought we should be addressing that. Second, they thought that signage was really important, that you want to make sure that the passengers getting off the vessels know where they're going, where their bus tours is or are starting, where the washrooms are, where the road to the Maritime Heritage Center is, or that kind of thing. Back to safety, they thought that the walk between Harbor Key and the Maritime Heritage Center was dangerous as it's currently configured, and they thought the idea of walking through Esso Beach, so on the west side of the fence, away from the road, was good, and that we should, even though it is supposedly a more active demographic, that we should be putting up benches in there. They thought we needed a really warm welcome. They loved what we had provided in 2013, which was music, a First Nation welcome, RCMP officers and Reg Surge, and ambassadors on hand to answer questions. They wanted maps, or they thought that maps were essential. They also, after a day and a half, and I hadn't heard them express any concern about the color in Harbor Key, I asked them directly, do we need to paint the buildings? Is there anything else we need to do? And they said, no, you've got 3 cruise ships coming in. And the cruise line is trying to decide if this adventure or expedition demographic is really going to work for them, and it's really going to work in your port. So by all means, add color, but make it flowers, flower pots, hang art on the fences, get colorful artwork in that way. And they did have a number of other suggestions. So we are bringing a report to council on Monday, 11th. Right.
That's a 2.
Thank you.
By the way.
Okay. And we we're asking a lot of the managers, because I just sent the note to our CAO this morning, and he distributed it to the other managers, but we're going to try and come up with some cost estimates for what we think is really necessary for the cruise ship visits. And they are also saying, if by all means you want to use it to, I guess, enhance the experience for other visitors, then, you know, look at doing more. But what we've given you is a list of what we think will bring cruise ship passengers back. And they said, quite honestly, by the time they've left, they won't really remember what color your buildings were. They'll remember the welcome and the goodbye and the expeditions.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Paulson?
I actually attended the the 2-day sessions that you're talking about, and first of all, just coming back to the Esso property, the Esso property came up more than a few times in the conversation, and I think the overall feeling, nobody really had a suggestion for, you know, the solution, but there was definitely a feel of disjointment between Harbor Key and the lighthouse area. But it definitely came up, and it definitely came up as a bit of a, if you will, a small sliver. The other thing that we as a city need to decide, and I fully support this, is do we as a city want to go into the cruise ship business? And we're talking about 2019 and well beyond, and we're not just talking about one cruise line, approaching one cruise line, but in the future going and presenting to several different cruise lines. And I'd just like to make a comment. I did some research on the ship that's coming. It's the Maasdam, M-A-A-S-D-A-M, and it was just re-outfitted last fall, and it's a high-end ship. If you go in and look at the pricing on the ship, it's not your for the faint of heart financially. There are top-end suites there that are $6,000 per person for a 21-day cruise. So we're dealing with people with disposable income in this particular instance. So it's just an interesting snapshot. And the other thing that I learned, I mean, we all look at the cruise ship business, we buy a ticket, walk up the gangplank, we party, and we get off. What we got was a snapshot of the business model that they operate on, and how difficult it is to get inroads as a community and to maintain that. So we as a community have to decide, are we going to go in all in on this, or are we just going to dabble, or what are we going to do? So,
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I remember when the World came, and I'm talking about a ship, or the cruise ship, and we had concerts. I emceed this whole big event and everything. It was really big, and then the next cruise ship came, and then it was stagnant for a while. And so where I'm going with this is how much of an investment do we want to make? And again, I'm playing devil's advocate. We see a lot of pocket crews come in. Some of them come off the ship. Some people stay on the ship. They don't want to come off. Now you have investments in, and I'm going to talk about other communities. Campbell River, look at how many millions of dollars they pumped into their investment, and how many ships have actually, they were really busy, and I think they've calmed down quite a bit. I don't know how many ships are going through there, and, pardon? Zero in their investment in what they did. Nanaimo's doing the same thing, so how much investment's going there right now? A lot of the cruise ships did not, and I was part of the cruise ship committee for a number of years, and they didn't want to make that turn into our port and that. And how much do we want to invest for that? And how many? So I'm having a really hard time with that. I was told when they did a study last time that people come to see what your community really looks like. They've gone to other ports where there's no infrastructure. They get off the ship, they go do what they have to do, and then they go back on. It's not Hawaii. We're not those kind of places that when you get off the cruise ship, we get, wow, the whole thing that happens. We have so much in our community that we do have to offer. And yes, we do want to do some work down at the quay, but I don't want to invest all my money in for a cruise ship that might 2 or 3 might come in, and then 10 years later we might get another cruise ship. So I want to invest it for the tourists that come in and actually go out and spend money in this community. And we might never see these people again. Yes, they'll talk about Port Alberni, but there's people from out of town that come from Vancouver, Alberta, that do more than that. They actually come here after they come into Port Alberni and spend money. They come back, and a lot of them have invested by buying homes here. So I think that's where I would like to see us go.
Okay. So I always think that we should look at tourism investment first from the perspective of improving quality of life for our residents, because so each of these investments, certainly they should be a benefit to cruise patrons as well, but let's consider if we're improving the quality of life of people who live here, and then from there, it's an added benefit for tourists, whether they're cruise tourists, Nanaimo tourists, U.S. tourists, whatever. So I have a list of people to speak. First is Councillor Poon.
Thank you. I think we should look at this in the long term. Tourist improvements are not just for tourists. Tourist improvements have a huge benefit for our community, and it does allow us to improve our quality of life. So I think we should look at it that way. And we've got a first impression to make, and I think we should make a good impression.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Corbeil.
Well, I think keeping along the same vein here, I would hope that, and for the most part, I think most everything Mr. Deacon said will be of value to the community long after the cruise ships have left, but I just hope that you always keep that in mind. The banners, I'm not so sure about. I know the banners we've had on light poles have been quite popular. If it's something that can be used after the ships leave, then I'm all for it. But if it's something that we roll away and put in a closet someplace, not so much. Thanks.
Okay, and Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. I'm not against developing the SO property, but what I am against is trying to develop new properties when you don't even have the money to take care of the properties that we have now. So I'd rather for the monies that we have go into maintaining what we do have and defer this development till we can have a bit more cash flow and can afford it more and do it right then.
Okay. So, Councillor Paulson.
Just to follow up to one of Councillor Sola's statements about Camel River investing millions of dollars into their cruise ship. We already have that in a Centennial Pier and stuff, so we don't really need to put in those millions of dollars of investment that Camel River did, and we have that in place. And one of the things that Aquila said, we're really lucky. When those cruise ship passengers get off, they come to Centennial Pier, they go to the Harbor Quay. I forget what, Cartagena, they actually get off in a busy container shipping area, and the actual cruise ship passengers have to go through a very active train yard across tracks and stuff. We have the perfect front door, I think, for this business.
Okay. So we haven't had a motion yet for adding anything specific. I would suggest that we wait and when a list is brought back with some potential cost items, we discuss it, adding it to the budget then, so February 11th. I think there's huge value in, at the very least, taking down the fencing, grassing that area, just making it look, it is part of the first impression, and right now we're getting, chain link fence as our first impression on our waterfront. So I do think it's an important piece of property, but I think we should wait and look at kind of the whole package for cruise options. If everybody agrees with that. Okay, we will hold it. And I think as well, it is 3 o'clock, so I'm going to suggest we take a 10-minute recess and give our minds a break and come back at 3:10. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. We have all our counselors. So next project on our list is the Russell Field light pole repairs, $10,000. Okay, is there a seconder? Second. And all in favor? Approved. Okay, and then we have Williamson Park Basketball Court, $25,000. Councillor Paulson?
I'd like to defer this pending results on the grant that is applied for.
Okay, any comments, Councillor? Okay, wonderful. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next, we have two projects for the Scott Kenny Trail. We have the Fourth Bridge and Stairway to Southgate Street. Councillor Kuhn?
I'd like to see this deferred because this isn't something that is a big appearance project right now. And I think we should focus on what we can see in our community. And this is really just buried in the forest, right? So,
Councillor Paulson?
This might be, and I'm not sure, but this might be something that qualifies under the Cycling BC grant. I know that we got a Cycling BC grant for part of this trail last year or the year before. So I support deferring it, and let's see if we can get some help funding this thing.
Okay, so I just want to comment that I don't like the comment that it's just buried in the bush. And although I understand the mentality behind it, it is not, about our first impression. So I can understand that. I do think our trail projects are very important projects. But I actually would, I think this is something, again, we should talk about during our strategic planning. Where does our trail system and network fit into our priorities list? I think if we're going to focus on trails, we need to look at which are the most important to complete, where do we need signage, and really improve the quality of our trail system and commit to that, build a plan for it. So I'm supportive of deferring this and talking about it during strategic planning. Any further comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Then we have Gyro Center retaining wall with seats and path, $15,000. Who would like to speak? I mean a counselor. Counselors? Okay, Counselor Solda.
I'm going to move to defer it for next year, and the reason is because we got a whole bunch of stuff with Parks and Rec coming up, and I think they are going to be much more important at this moment. So I would like to defer it.
Okay. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Any further comments? All in favor? Carried. Moving down the list to Parks, Recreation, and Facilities, we have Gyro Center security cameras, $10,000. Councillor Solda.
I'll move that we put this on our budget.
Okay, is there a seconder? Second. All in favor? Carried. And Glenwood Center ride-on floor scrubber. Councillor Haggard.
If my memory serves me right, and it's kind of iffy these days if it does, I think Rob, you had said you could possibly get one more year out of it? Or who said it?
Possibly, but as of last week, our mechanic indicated it may have a problem with the onboard charger. So
Okay.
I have to get more information. Otherwise,
So possibly not.
otherwise we could run it as long as it will run.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Solda.
So a question on the onboard charger, since I don't know anything about that. What would it cost just to replace that instead of $9,000? And more information, please.
Last year, we spent $5,000 on new batteries for it, and the charger was what caused the batteries to go. Now the charger is going, the mechanic said, so I have a feeling it'll be thousands for the charger.
Thank you. Can I ask, we spent $5,000 on batteries just for this piece of equipment?
4,000 for batteries, 1,000 for a motor just on this in the last 2 years. So that's why I don't want to spend any more on it.
For sure, yes. I think it's important for us to, I know quite often we, at a council level, drive our staff to run equipment as long as possible, no matter what the cost, because we don't want to spend money on new equipment. I think we need to start thinking about the cost of running that equipment as long as we do, and sometimes, and maybe rethink our policy on that, and support our staff in bringing forward needs before we spend, half the value of the piece of equipment. I think we had Councillor Poon first.
I think we should go ahead with it. Just out of curiosity, though, if the batteries are dead, then can you run an extension cord?
It's for washing the floor around Glenwood, so it would be hard
So you'd
to-
need a very long extension cord.
Yeah, and probably get all tangled up.
Councillor Solda.
So are you looking at purchasing the similar one, or is something else that's come up that's actually much more productive?
The one that I may look at, although if approved, we would probably bring in demo models and see what staff
See
like,
what's-
which ones meet our needs. But there are some now that you stand on, like they ride
Yeah.
ride on, unlike the old days when I would get towed behind them on my roller skates.
Okay, so we don't have a motion on the floor, do we, Madam Mayor, right now? So I'm going to move that we go ahead with this piece of equipment, because I'm a big on, if it's going to cost us a lot more to fix it, in the long run, I would rather just replace it.
Okay, I'll a second. Do you have a
We
comment?
have lots of equipment, as some of you know, I've been here many, many decades. There's some janitorial equipment like that that is still running fine, and then you get some that, this piece is probably from the late 90s, early 2000s at the newest, so.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, any more comments on that? All in favor? Carried. Garbage can compounds citywide. Councillor Paulson?
Is this something that we could do over time? Like if we took the 30,000 and I'm just throwing it out there, did 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 over the next 3 years? What would $10,000 in compounds get us and get us to the end run 3 years from now?
For our bigger facilities is the big one. So that'd probably use more than 10, probably closer to 15 to 18,000 for the bigger facilities that we should be doing. The little stuff like our groundskeepers and all that, we have, let's say, paper mill dam and all that, we want to put them, they could probably be holding off, but we could at least put them a concrete pad for safety for them, as well as our pickup and removals of where they're going to sit.
So could you do this over?
We could do it, yeah, that's,
just
we'll do the
phases?
main ones with guarded, and then the ones that are remote, we could probably put the pads down for this year or the next year or so, and then that'll help the situation. Right now, a lot of them are getting put in a muddy area, so it'd be nice to have a concrete pad down, minimal.
Okay. So my feeling on this is that I think it would be nice, it's not necessarily a need for this year or a high priority compared with some of the other projects we have. So I would suggest that we just bring it back next year.
Are you moving that?
I'll make a motion, sure.
Sure, I'll second that.
Okay. Councillor Washington?
Could you, like say the multiplex after a game, how many, I know back in the old days, there was 2 big blue bins that the garbage trucks magically
Up
picked
to
up.
24 units.
And they're just sitting out there?
Yes, well, right now they're left in the Colson side, and then they have to drag every one of them out before the truck gets there, but it's up to 24 units on a Bulldogs night.
Thank you.
Okay, on the motion to defer, or bring it back for the options list next year, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, next we have alarm panels at heritage facilities. Okay, Councillor Solda?
So, Madam Mayor, could I just get enlightened again on the alarm panels again? Just give me some more background information, please.
Remember, we're not saying which facilities.
Okay.
The alarm panels at most of our facilities have been upgraded, but the heritage buildings like the IHS building, the McLean's Mill in particular, and the Roundhouse are as old as alarm technology as you can get. You can't even see the user's name. There's, again, I won't for security reasons say, but there's areas that we can't secure any longer.
They're heritage. machines. We can't replace that. That's right. They're a piece of the history. Council, anyone wanting to add this to the budget this year? Councillor Solda?
I'm going to add it to the budget because we have no idea what we're doing in the future with some of our areas, and we'll probably need alarms if we, so yes.
Is there a seconder to add? Okay. I personally see this as not as high of a priority this year. And I think if it's at specific locations, we might be able to fund it through those specific budgets as well. I think over the last few years at McLean Mill specifically, we have tried to make sure all of the McLean Mill spending is under the McLean Mill budget and not in other areas. So we do have money in our budget for McLean Mill at this point still, and then we do have money in the budget connected to IHS also. So that's just my feeling on it. Any other comments before we vote on this one?
I agree with your thought. Put it under their own budget.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Just a quick thought, and regardless of who the tenant is, who is there, these are city properties and we need to protect them, and we need, even if they were unoccupied, they are a facility that needs security and those sorts of things. So just my 2 bits worth.
Madam Mayor?
CAO.
Can I ask for a clarification? Is this motion that you're considering saying that you don't want to identify this in the budget, in the options list, but you do want the work done coming out of MMS budget? Is that council's direction?
This motion is actually to add this into the budget,
I'm sorry,
but
okay.
I would say if it was defeated, I think I kind of hear a consensus that we want to protect our buildings for sure.
So if it's defeated, maybe you could reconsider that then?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Okay. All in favor? Motion is to put it into the budget. And opposed? Okay, in the budget. Okay. We can take it out. You don't sell your desire to keep it in so much when you vote for it and then say we could take it out right away.
I'm looking at the bottom line here now.
I'm adding the numbers up. They're high. Okay, next one is Echo Fieldhouse Furnace number 1, $6,600.
I'd like to move to include this in the budget.
Is there a seconder? Second. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. And Echo Fieldhouse parking lot resurface.
I'd like to move that we defer this to 2021.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. I heard that. Multiplex retaining wall, 52,800. Okay.
Motion to defer it for next year's option list, Madam Mayor. Not that it wouldn't be nice to have, but
Okay.
I'm gonna.
Is there a seconder? All in favor? And multiplex skate shop upgrades, $11,000.
So, Madam Mayor, may I ask, again, for the upgrades, is that to upgrade the skates and everything? Just give me a little more hindsight on that, please.
Madam Mayor, further to our previous budget meeting, in order of priority of the skate shop upgrades, first of all would be service or replace the exhaust system. Secondly, some shelving, an improved workstation, and then paint and flooring throughout. So we have in our operating budget, Madam Mayor, a replacement of the skates themselves. So this isn't the inventory of rental skates. This is for the actual workspace itself.
So the upgrades on, you said the exhaust system, what's the matter with, could we get
Correct.
more?
I believe it's for the skate sharpener itself. It puts off a hazardous gas for our workers.
So, Madam Mayor, so what is the cost for that particular piece of?
Madam Mayor, we'd be happy to bring back additional information if required.
Okay. And I'm happy with that.
Okay, so we'll leave it until then.
Yep.
The next one is multiplex Parks Yard Genie Lift.
Madam Mayor, if I may. So further to the request from the previous budget meeting regarding cost and what we've spent on renting units. So in the past year and a half, we've spent $9,200 in renting lifts, plus $2,500 in the previous 2 weeks for bucket trucks with our electrician. And so this unit itself that we're quoting is a used unit that we would expect to have a lifespan of 20 years.
And that's 55,000 is accurate still?
Correct.
Used unit. Okay. That's a long time. That's great. Okay, thank you for bringing back those numbers. Councillor Poon.
What would the yearly maintenance costs amount to for this Genie lift?
It's mostly just the battery operation of it and lubricating, so our local mechanics can actually do that. But if there's anything safety via WorkSafe BC or something, have different regulations, and we'll have to relook at that. But for the current stuff, it could be all done in-house.
So what's the battery replacement interval? for this
They're just
machine?
24 volt, so it's lower cost. It's not a $4,000 shot.
Great.
Yeah.
Councillor Corbeil next.
I'd like to move that we put the Genie lift in this year's budget.
Okay, is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Solda.
So I like the Genie lift. I think it comes in handy for rentals and that, for everything we have, and not just in that particular area. It could be other areas in the city. I do have a question is, for renting that particular piece, you would rent it to ADSS for grad, different, it'd be built in, right, as a rental fee?
Yes, so there would be
So
access
some
to the unit and an operator would be available for rent, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Next, we have multiplex parking lot repaving. Well, Ron, we're at 837,500 total spent so far, if I'm tracking it correctly, or somewhere reasonably close to that. So it doesn't really matter where we're at with gas tax because we're going to fully expend the gas tax, I would think. So we're going to have to come back to all of this, but that's kind of roughly where we're at right now. Director Thorpe?
Madam Mayor, so since it's council's wish to defer the multiplex retaining wall, it would be staff's recommendation to also defer the repaving and tackle both projects simultaneously.
Okay.
I'll move to defer.
Okay, seconder? All in favor? Carried. Next, we have Johnston Road planter box installation, $20,000. Councillor Solda.
So my question is, again, to give me more information, how many planter boxes are we looking at out of $20,000?
It'd be 6 units plus 12 smaller ones, and it would be with irrigation.
Well, we have been talking about adding more beautification in the city and stuff like that. I have no problem. I would like to see other areas in our community get planter boxes, but this is a great start, and I'll move to put it in our budget.
Okay, is there a seconder? And I'll just add that we've been adding every year planter boxes, and I think they are what we probably get the most comments on.
I would agree.
Out of anything that goes into our budget, it's the $20,000 planter boxes, and of course that's because our staff do a fantastic job of planting. So I think this is a worthwhile investment, and it says Johnson Road. I don't know that we necessarily need to keep it to Johnson Road, but wherever staff sees the greatest need or the highest impact. Are there any comments? Or sorry, Rob, did you have a comment?
No, that's accurate unless you guys wanted to put it somewhere else, but we'd like to, carry on with the blocking so we do complete it and get rid of some older trees that are around that area as well that are starting to touch RVs and stuff that are parking at the businesses as well.
Did you say get rid of trees?
Oh, no.
Not get rid of, remove and change them out to smaller, more economical, and something that doesn't need to be watered as much and less maintenance.
I almost just voted against that whole thing. I'm not even sure that would be the right thing to vote against. But
No, it's not to replace the trees. It's to the areas that are not green.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Councillor Solda.
I would like to see us come down Third Avenue and go up the hill here and everywhere eventually. Yes?
I just, on Friday, no, Thursday, sorry, we just finished a grant to do Lower Third Avenue, so hopefully that goes through.
Super, and I appreciate the irrigation being built in instead of having someone actually go out and water.
And there's
So-
a lot of areas that I've already built into budget that will get done as well.
Super, thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Paulson?
Just once again, talking about phasing, what would 10 this year get us and 10 year next year?
Half the boxes.
Well, exactly. So it gets us to the end result.
Yeah,
right?
it'd be like a half or one side. We could do one side or maybe halfway up. That's up to you guys.
Yeah. I believe in this project totally. It just, we're getting done. Okay.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, and next we have Aquatic Center Accessibility Lift. Councillor Solda.
I think this is important. I think we have people in the community that really use this piece of equipment, and I'm going to move to put it in the budget.
A second. Okay, any comments? All in favor? Carried. RCMP Building Temporary Exhibit Lockers. Councillor Solda.
The last time the inspector spoke that and this has been an ongoing issue, including with our old police station, the exhibit lockers and that. If you ever saw where they put their exhibits in the old building, it wasn't very pretty. And yeah, the inspector's got, I'm sure he wants to say
Out
something.
of the hot seat.
So I have
Welcome,
no doubt.
Inspector Hunter. Found your way up.
Yes, this is called intimidation, isn't it? No, I'm just kidding. So when I saw it in the old police station, the exhibit lockers and that, and how things were put in the lockers, I'm going to move this because I think it's very important in our community because exhibits aren't properly stored. It could win or break a case.
Is there a seconder? Inspector Hunter, could you comment on whether this is a priority or not? Because I just seem to remember when this came forward, you kind of looking like, where did this come from?
Your worship, it is a priority, and I just want to explain that they're not temporary lockers, they're permanent lockers in the detachment. It's a room where the members store the exhibits during a night shift, etc., and then they get moved into the main locker. They're old, decrepit lockers, and we have stuff spewing out into the floor, and quite candidly, Councillor Solda, you're bang on. We have to have continuity of those exhibits, and the last thing we want to do is to be explaining in court how various people had access to the exhibits because they weren't properly locked, and we do need proper lockers in there.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? It's already been made. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And the next one, RCMP Building GIS Flooring. Councillor Solda.
I'm going to motion to defer this one for the next budget.
Seconder. Any questions or comments? None. All in favor? Carried. On to tree planting program. Would anybody like to speak to tree planting program? Any questions? I'm going to move that we include this tree planting program in the budget. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
And I will just comment that I think that trees are probably the most important investment we can make in community beautification. You know, we've got these beautiful wide streets. I think we could do a lot more than $10,000 of tree planting, but this is a great start. And we have a grant that goes toward this as well. So I think it's a great program. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. And moving on, we have fireworks show. Councillor Haggard.
At our last budget meeting, you mentioned about contacting the regional district to see if they'd be interested in partnering. Could we possibly do that? Request that from them and see if they could partner, then it would be half and half.
I think it's a great idea. Councillor Solda and I could bring that forward at the regional district. Any other comments on this one? Councillor Solda?
Madam Mayor, I believe we have a meeting coming up and with the Alberni committee, and maybe we could put that on the agenda this week.
Great idea. Let's task you to do that.
You bet. We will do that.
Okay, so we will hold off on this one then until we go through that process. And continuing down the list, we have RCMP remove, so we have a few options for RCMP. Remove the reduction of one member, which is a cost of 175,000, add one member, total cost 350,000, add two members, 525,000, add four members, 875,000, and the community policing coordinator, 114,000. So can we clarify the 114,000 for, Inspector Hunter's report indicated around 60,000, I think, but I'm not sure if we're looking at this kind of backwards from where we're at.
Madam Mayor, I calculated that from the highest QP band, hourly wage, and added the burden, which is about 58% with benefits and everything, and that came to 114.
Okay. Councillor Solda.
Okay, so I just want to be clear on this. I do want to add a member. I'm not sure about two members. I understand we have members that are off, and then the federal government picks up the costs for those members that are off, so that's why we get the money back. So, but I'm not sure about the police coordinator. That would bring another member back into the folds of the RCMP to do the coordination. And I'm not sure in a long-term effect how that would work. Now, I believe the inspector said if we went with two officers or one member and the full complement came back and there was nobody off work, they could stay or they could go. We could play around with that. But if we land up having a coordinator, they become a staff member, right? Am I going in the right fold? And that's a little different in the game. So I'm not sure how council feels, and I guess I'm going to go out there and make a full motion, and then either it gets defeated and then we start all over again. So I'm going to go with the two officers.
Is there a seconder?
We'll move that.
Okay. Discussion. CAO to start.
Madam Mayor, for clarity, maybe we could have presented it better or differently. So there's the option of removing, because council's all aware that the draft budget currently includes a reduction of a member. So when you say adding two members, are you saying eliminate the reduction of one and add another, or are you saying eliminate the reduction of one and add two more? Because it would, otherwise adding two and taking away one is a net of one.
Okay.
So if you can take that into account so the direction is clear.
Let's clear that. Okay, for now, let's go with keeping the one and adding one. And then next year we can look at this again.
Okay, discussion. Councillor Haggard.
Can I ask staff a question, please?
Yeah, for sure.
If I remember correctly, but again, my memory is not always correct, at the last budget meeting, when Inspector Hunter did his presentation, any slippage from the RCMP goes into our contingency fund, correct?
No, it goes into a reserve fund.
Well, a reserve fund, sorry. Okay, reserve fund. So, and I think Inspector Hunter said that if there was no slippage in this, and so they had to pay for the second officer, then there was an agreement that they could take money from that reserve fund to pay part of the salary if there was no slippage? I'm a little bit confused.
Madam Mayor, if I can. So the reserve, so the term slippage. So as the inspector explained, the city contracts 34 members, and through the various movements of staff or staff being away or reassigned, there's a slippage piece so that those positions are not all fully staffed through the year. So at the end of each year, it has been our experience that the RCMP returns some money to the city, an under expenditure, if you like. And several years ago, the city made, I think, the prudent move to say, look, we're going to take this slippage fund, this under expenditure, and put it in a reserve fund and let it accumulate up to no more than $1 million. I think 2 years ago, we changed that and allowed it to go up to $2 million. And so it's not an automatic that money would be drawn upon. So if we had a very expensive investigation, for example, or some other unforeseen cost, that council could decide at any point in the year to allocate funds from that reserve to operating. Am I correct, Kathy?
Yes, that's where it goes now. It offsets the RCMP operating contract,
So
except for what council has directed us to park in a reserve.
That's correct. And so in the last couple of years, in order to try to reduce the overall impact of the cost, we've counted on the slippage of the equivalent of the cost of 2 officers. So our budget includes what we look at as a revenue of $350,000 a year, which is the equivalent to the cost of 2 officers. So we're already accounting for that slippage in our budget, and we don't think that there's an ability to account for more without running the risk of running deficit more often than not. And Kathy, is that fair to say?
Yes, I just want to add one more point. If they were fully staffed all the time, there would be no there would be no surplus.
Okay, Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I feel a little uncomfortable trying to make a decision of this magnitude with the amount of information we have. At a previous meeting, Inspector Hunter made the comment that we were the most expensive detachment, and I did a little research, and he's absolutely correct. We are by far the most expensive detachment, with the exception of Langley City. We're over $100 per capita more than any other community that's policed by the RCMP, and over 15,000 population in BC. Now, statistics aren't always accurate, but that's a little bit of information I gleaned by just doing a little Googling. So before I make any decision that, quite honestly, will, if we were to add 2 officers, would certainly increase the taxes on citizens of Port Alberni, I'd like a lot more information.
Thank you, Councillor Solda.
To answer that, and it might not be totally accurate, but we are already increasing the taxes and everything on the citizens just by what's happening out on our streets. You know, we're building infrastructure, we're adding more lights just for safety and different areas, and I think having and we're having now to put cameras up and security systems, so the citizens are being taxed a little bit more, maybe not as much, but this is what you hear all over the streets. We need more people, more officers out there walking the streets, doing the patrols. And in the summertime, the merchants uptown on the 3rd Avenue are afraid, and we need. Nobody says maybe in 3 years it might be fine. We might have a utopia that we all would love, but this might be just a start. And I don't know if it's going to help or not, but what a way to start. So,
Councillor Paulson.
Just for me, looking at this, first of all, the position that the community is in, I really believe that in supporting our police officers, we need to have a concerted effort, and they need manpower to get this done. For me, first of all, reducing 1 member for me is a non-starter at this point in the game. So I kind of take that one off the board. If we invest in a community policing coordinator at $114,000, that frees up a $175,000 officer to actually be boots on the ground. Am I right? Mm-hmm. And I guess the final clarification that I need is at $175,000, and we add a member, and there's a $350,000 figure. And I know this was explained to me, but I just need it explained again, the difference between 175 and 350 for an additional member.
CAO, if you want to go over that again.
So 175,000 would eliminate the planned reduction of
Right.
1 member. So putting 175,000 back into the budget would eliminate the need to make a reduction.
So why is that guy worth 175 and the 1 member below 350?
It's 1 member or 2 members,
So-
but it's just how it's structured in the budget.
So we've structured it as the net impact of adding 1 member is effectively 2 positions. 350 is 2 times 175. So when the line that says add one member envisions that you've already reversed the other one.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it includes that first line?
Yeah, exactly. So you
Okay.
wouldn't add both, yeah.
Okay. Big confusion, old guy.
Councillor Poon.
I think we really have to look at this 175,000 and think about what other solutions can we come up with. You know, instead of hiring someone, or what can we do to make our community more safe without hiring more police officers? Just look at the enhanced security program. That's a good initiative that doesn't cost a lot, but may have a big impact.
Thank you. So I have to really agree with you, Councillor Poon. I left our last budget meeting thinking, how many police officers are we going to hire? And I think we all see the need for them. Hearing Inspector Hunter talk about the current need and the ongoing need and the state of where we're at in our community today certainly doesn't make you want to reduce an officer. I think on the other end of that, we need to expand our conversation about public safety in our community. It seems when we talk about safety, we talk only about policing, and there's so much more to it than policing. We have invested last year heavily through bylaw, and not that we want to, not that bylaw is policing or that we want to replace policing with bylaw, but a huge part of public safety is how people feel about their community. There's the broken window theory that says that areas that are depressed draw more crime. We just talked about the graffiti program and the rate of crime and how much it goes up in areas that are graffitied. So we are investing in public safety in our community in a lot of ways. And I think if we look at how much money we can commit in our budget, and if we commit it all to policing, or we split it out to other initiatives, I think that we can be more effective with a more balanced approach rather than looking strictly at policing as the way to improve safety in the community. So a few things, some of these things we're already doing, but a few ideas that I came up with, and we're not going to decide on them here today, but laneway lighting. I think we should be investing in alley lighting in our community. A huge amount of property crime happens in dark alleys in this town, and that's not something that we have talked about as a council. Security patrolling or security company patrolling. We used to have a company that patrolled the Harbor Quay and different areas of town. I think it was Footprint Security. I don't know who they were contracted through, but I don't think we do that anymore. We could be looking at, cost, but $175,000 for one police officer. We could be looking at a combination of a police officer or maybe investing in a $60,000 a year contract to have people driving around in our community and reporting things to the police. Because at the end of the day, what we need in our community is eyes, and then we need our police to be available. So I think we just have to look at a balanced approach of where we can get the most value for our community. The graffiti removal program was a great investment. I still really think we need a community safety office, specifically uptown, where we could possibly have RCMP, community policing, possibly bylaw working out of it. Different lighting initiatives, housing initiatives. We know that a huge amount of our crime is focused around people who are not stably housed. It's not a city issue, but the city could be at the table. The city could be offering incentives for people to put suites in our homes. There's a lot that we could do, and if we took that money and invested it in a diverse kind of area, and if in a diversified approach, I think we could probably get further ahead. So I'm not willing to support the motion that was made. I think that we can take $350,000 and invest it in more things to improve public safety, that we need to expand the conversation around what public safety is and how to get there. Councillor Paulson.
Again, I totally support everything that you said there, but I think we have to realize in the inspector's statements that he's made, the policing that we're looking for is to take care of the hardened criminal element that we have working here that's costing us millions of dollars every year. And recidivism is part of that problem, and I get that. But I totally support that we need to backfill that a bit. But we need to take care of a very serious problem that's going on in our community right now, and that's hardened criminals, and we need to put them away and get them off the streets. And we got a serious problem where I think you're saying that about 5% of their time is spent on the streets and 90% is spent doing foreign work. We need to give that support at some point. So I think we need some short-term pain financially to get this thing under control. And, you know, as the inspector said, if 2 years down the road, if we kind of get a handle on this and can reduce some of that policing cost, he will. I know it's tough for managers to say, I will reduce my cost, but we've got a serious problem in the community that we need to address, and we can't ignore it. And some of the stuff, the graffiti program and stuff is great, but it's not taking care of that person. You know, getting that person off the street.
Neither is putting them in jail for a short period of time. We're not breaking any kind of cycle.
Keep putting them in there.
We're going to keep putting them in there. We're going to keep putting them in there until our crime rate is even higher and higher and higher, and we're not going to actually address our issue. They're going to be let out. Councillor Solda.
I think, like your list, I love your list. I have no problem with that. But strategically, we haven't sat down and talked about how we want, what we want. And it's going to take a little bit for us to get to where we want to all be on the same page. But we have a problem now, and I'd like to see us tackle that problem now. I think we've started some great initiatives, and past councils have started some great initiatives, and we just need to move forward. I know there was strategic plans that the RCMP had that they target certain criminals in our community, and if there's a shortage for them not to go ahead and move forward with that, I think that we need to give them the aid to be able to do that. Thank you.
Other comments? Councillor Haggard?
Okay, I just want to be clear. Are we allowed to take money from that reserve fund to put towards a salary of an RCMP officer? Yes or no? I can't remember what you said. Sorry.
We've already done that.
We've already done that. Okay.
CEO?
Madam Mayor, if the question is, can we strategically draw down the reserve fund in order to, for a year-by-year basis to do that? What does that look like? If council was to say, we want to make a staffing change, and rather than increase general revenue, we want to draw this year from the reserve.
If council directs us to do that, yes, we can pull it, excuse me, from the reserve that we've already established. When I said that, I knew there was more to your question, sorry.
Councillor Solda?
I really caution on that. I remember making that, putting that motion forward to start a reserve fund. And again, like even the inspector, and when I was on the RCMP consulting team, when a $1 million bill came to Campbell River, I can't even tell you how Campbell River felt when they didn't know about it after their murder, and there was a murder in Campbell River, and then they got that bill and they didn't expect that. Can you imagine how the taxpayers felt? That was many years ago. So that fund came ahead. Now we're looking at $1 million doesn't go very far anymore on an investigation. And every time there is an accident in this community, it's pretty sad when I have to go up to not to this inspector, but the previous inspectors and say, which road did it happen? If it was on the provincial highway, we don't have to worry about that. But if it's on our roads, suddenly the whole team has to come in, and the bill, who pays for it? So I am really adamant on that reserve fund because I don't want to see the future of citizens in our community be stuck with more than $1 million. Thank you.
So I just want to comment a couple things. Number one, Inspector Hunter did recommend the option, or I think he recommended earlier in our conversation tonight, the community policing change. So our motion that we have on the floor does not, he felt that would be the best use of resources, does not actually address that. So we would be keeping the community policing officer actual member, and then also adding 2. So I think that we are missing some low-hanging fruit in terms of what makes the most sense here as a start.
Madam Mayor, let me change that motion and rephrase it. Do we have to defeat it first? Okay, I'm going to withdraw it, and I'll make a new motion. If that's okay with the seconder, who seconded that? That's fine. Okay, so I'm going to keep the officer that was supposed to be
The reduction.
And we'll go with the community policing coordinator, if that makes everybody give me that officer.
Is there a seconder? Okay, any conversation or comments? Okay, I will comment one more time that I think it's really important that we look at crime and public safety in our community in a larger way. I think we're very much, and I understand it's our top issue as a community for sure, but I think that we are looking only at policing and leaving a lot out. Over the weekend, I read the City of Langley's public safety plan. It had a better name than that, but it was about 30 pages long. They had a number of recommendations, and most of them were not around policing. Certainly, you know, they recognize they need their core number of people, but public safety is a lot more than just policing and the crime aspect of it. And I think we're leaving a large part of that out in our conversation today. But that said, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. On to, where are we? Administration, City Hall generator.
Will that make it warmer in here?
I don't think it will.
Oh, well, I can't.
Director Thorpe.
If there's no power, yes.
Madam Mayor, just to clarify that currently in the capital budget, we've earmarked $50,000, and so this $30,000 represents the increase for the groundwork. So for the sidewalk and the underground wiring that staff's recommending.
Okay. Council?
I'd like to move that we include this.
Okay. Is there a seconder? Okay. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What do we got now here? Have we got anything?
You have the City Works emergency generator that gets hooked up remotely on a trailer on the side here. Yeah, yeah.
CAO?
Madam Mayor and Council, just so you're aware, that City Works generator currently only powers the servers, the city servers, which if they go down unexpectedly, we can lose data, and there's a long delay in restarting. So several weeks ago, when we had the weather event here, city power went down, and in the end, we sent staff home early, and we were out of business. So we need to be in business. I think it's an important project.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Paulson?
This is the generator, certainly. I mean, we had the power outage, but if we were without power and isolated in an earthquake issue, this is the generator that would keep us in business, right?
And I think we originally put the first part of the project in our budget in like 2016. So.
That's correct, Madam Mayor, and frankly, we under budgeted for it, given the groundworks that you've heard about that need to be done. So the project we think is going to be $80,000 all in, and there's 50 already on hand.
Great. Okay. No further questions? All in favor? Carried. Okay, and possible increase to the community investment program budget. Any comments? Councillor Solda.
A motion to defer for next.
Is there a seconder? Okay, any comments? I just want to comment that I actually think we need to increase this, but I think we should increase it with specific criteria. So I would love to see us create maybe separate streams of this. Some could be events that work toward reconciliation. Some could be events that work toward public safety, or not necessarily events, but applications. I think we should maybe review the community investment program as a whole in the next year or during strategic planning, and then maybe allocate a larger budget next year. Councillor Paulson?
Just a quick comment, and I'm sure that this thing, there's no dollar value attached to it. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, this kind of was a roundabout way of talking about the fireworks show at the Sound Fest and being part of the community investment program. But also with the community forest, and one of their requests is that they have a community fund that they can give to projects and that sort of thing. And I think we need to coordinate that if we're going to go ahead with it, with the community investment program. And I know that Willa has said that she would work with the community forest to pull that together so that it's not overlapping and we're not doing the same thing. So there's much discussion here. So I support deferring it until we come up with a full plan.
Okay. Okay, no further comments?
It does need more money though.
It does need more money for sure. All in favor? Carried. And Parks and Recreation, we have Harbor Key facelift.
Madam Mayor,
$200,000.
if I may. The $200,000 placeholder is strictly for preparation and painting only. So as Mr. Deacon said in his report, that Aquila's feeling is not recommending painting. Whatever the will of council, of course, staff is happy to come back with pricing or quotes or reports. But just for context sake, the $200,000 placeholder is strictly for, that would only cover preparation and painting, just to give you an idea of context of the type of investment required.
Okay, thank you. Council? Councillor Paulson.
Me again. I think we, talking about facelift and everything, I think we have some report coming back with regards to short-term cleanup and stuff too, that can make the key and the area more presentable. So I look forward to hearing about that and even extending it up Argyle and that sort of thing.
Great. Councillor Haggard.
May I ask staff another question?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I couldn't find the criteria to apply to the Community Forest Legacy Committee for that $150,000 that we're going to be getting from the forestry fund. So is it possible for us to maybe work with that committee and see if that could be contributed to Harbor Key facelift?
So I'll just comment on that the Legacy Fund is our committee if we choose to activate it. So that money comes automatically to the city and we decide if we want it to go to the Legacy Committee or not. So at this point, that $150,000 plus $100,000 from last year is, or once we receive it, will just be money there for us to decide what to do with next. So if we had a project that we wanted to do with it, it doesn't have to go to the Legacy Committee.
Because I think Harbor Key facelift really fits in with the mandate that it benefits the whole community.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I'm hearing that we're going to wait on that one. Okay, on to McLean Mill Capital. So just a refresher, we had $95,000 in our budget. No, sorry, we had $120,000 in our budget. We took out what didn't need to be in there because we had applied for a grant. So this is the additional capital. Councillor Poon?
Maybe we need to wait until after our meeting with MMS next week before we look at deciding what to do with it.
I think we would all agree on that. CAO, is that what you were going to suggest? Great. Okay, so that is all that is on our options list. I don't think we need to add up how much we've spent so far. I stopped adding. That's right.
That means another meeting.
That's right. So thank you to council and staff for going through this process today. A reminder that everything that's in here is just a starting point for us. I think we're going to need to see where we're at to go through at least some of the projects again. One thing that I would like to see, we have, and I've been meaning to ask for it for a couple of meetings, at the bottom here we have available funds from operations plan, $665 and $100,000. That is based on our 3% budget direction. But that, to my understanding, that is 3% budget increase, but doesn't account for the non-market change that BC Assessment talked about, which was like new builds and things like that. So I'm wondering if staff could bring us back what 3% increase to the average home would reflect.
Yes, certainly. It was on my to-do list, but I wasn't here a lot last week. Sorry.
Thank you.
Apologies.
That's great. Okay, Council, is there any other direction or questions we'd like to ask for our next budget meeting? Okay, all right. Would somebody like to move adjournment? Second? All in favor? Carried.